Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 149 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, but today's news expands a little bit into the Black Sea and into Istanbul itself, as the largest news we've gotten today is, of course, incredibly good news, and something that's been troubling a lot of people around the world for quite some while, ever since the beginning of the war. Before we actually cover that, though, and get into tonight's schedule, I do have to mention again, and do a little plug. I know we don't do a lot of these here on the channel, but of course, a little plug every once in a while. We do have a limited edition merchandise run going right now on this channel. If you would like to follow me for a second and see where you can find this exquisite merchandise, you can go to the stream. Oh, look, Enforcer streaming with 2,000 people watching. That's cool. I do have to mention again, we mute that video, we go down here, and in the description, we actually have 3 separate links. And before I actually plug the merch store, let me explain what these are again to some of our newer viewers. This one right here, Support the War Effort, will take you to United24, where you can donate directly to the Ukrainian government and help them out with the war effort. This will take you to an invite to the Discord server. This little link will take you to the map I'm using right here. And this one, at the very top, will take you to the Enforcer store. If you click on that link, you'll go straight to the merchandise store, the official store, where you can see all of our limited edition merch, as well as the normal stuff. The Lee Spring Army merch and the Coffee Fund merch is the stuff that is limited edition right now. And so if you see these 2 designs on anything, including these hoodies, these t-shirts, or this sticker, those are limited edition. They will only be up until tomorrow at midnight. And of course, if you would like to support this channel and get something really cool out of it to show your pride for the channel, make sure to hop over to the Enforcer store and get one of these, because they're actually pretty cool, and I've gotten one myself of the Lee Spring Army one, because, you know, Matthew and me actually are, of course, the Lee Spring Army itself, and it's really cool to have one of these. But without further ado, just wanted to run that by y'all again and remind y'all, Matthew did put a decent amount of effort into the designs on both of these, and I hope that y'all do make sure to get some and support this little channel. With that, we're now going to be moving away from the little stream here. Once again, really cool stream. Y'all should go check it out. And with that, we are now back into the Ukraine war map, and we're going to go over tonight's schedule as to what we're covering and in what order. Starting off, we'll be beginning, not in Ukraine, but in Istanbul, as we got large news today from Turkey that let us know that the Russian blockade will be retreating and the Ukrainian grain will flow. We'll of course cover that first thing, and then we'll be moving up the coast of the western Black Sea, where we can then see some additional news from the coastline of Bulgaria, a really interesting piece at that. After that, we'll then be moving into Ukraine, and we'll be covering a bit of the news in Kyiv. We have one piece of news from the center of Kyiv, which is really cool. After that, we'll then be moving into our location unknowns and covering all of those as well. After we cover the location unknowns, we'll then be moving into the Kharkiv and Belgrade area, but before we get there, we're going to take a quick little pause and answer 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into our Kharkiv and Belgrade news, and just making sure we don't have any Russian news. After we cover all of the Kharkiv and Belgrade news, we'll then also be moving down into the northern Donbass, which will include Kramatorsk, the Lysychansk pocket, and also this one piece of news in Avdiivka. After we cover this segment of news, we'll then be moving further down the front towards the Donetsk region, where we have 2 bits of news there. But of course, before we get there, we have to answer another 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then cover the Donetsk news, the southern front news from the Mykolaiv area, also the news somewhere in the middle of Ukraine. As far as we could tell, it was somewhere in the center of Ukraine, but we're not entirely sure about that, but that's where the marker wound up. And then finally, after we cover that bit of news, let me make sure there's no additional news I'm forgetting about. There isn't. We'll then go to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Zelensky, rounding out tonight's news segment. And then after that, we'll be moving into the question segment and answering everyone's questions, everyone who's sent in a super chat, as well as many live chat questions as we can. And so with that, it is now time to start off the big news today with a crisis being averted as the Russians, the Ukrainians, and the Turks came to an agreement that Ukrainian grain will flow and the Russian blockade will pretty much wither away. This news article here, since it is a political event, we do rely on a news article. We can see here the agreement being signed at the table, showing that all 3 countries have agreed that Ukrainian grain will be able to be shipped out of Ukrainian ports, meaning that the food crisis that was potentially going to start developing in the coming months has been averted for now. It's incredibly good news. Of course, a lot of people have been worrying about that, and 400 million people worldwide rely on Ukrainian grains to stay alive and eat. And so it's incredibly important that Ukrainian grain is continuing to flow, and here we can see that that has been done today. For one of the first times, we've seen the Russians exercise a little bit of humanity in signing this agreement, and it's great to know that the Russian naval blockade will pretty much fade into obscurity, because ships will be allowed into Mykolaiv and Odessa to, of course, unload grains and then ship them out worldwide. With that, we're now going to be moving from the outstanding news at Istanbul, which is, of course, wonderful to hear, and we're now going to be moving into the area of Bulgaria on the coastline. We don't know specifically where on the coastline this was, but we did see a Pantsir missile wash up on the coast, at least the propellant section of the missile, which you can see right here. Very odd that one is washed up. We're not really sure how it wound up in the sea or adrift in a way that it could end up at Bulgaria's coast. But still, we did see one here, and I thought it was just an interesting thing to note that sometimes the war literally washes up onto other people's shores, and here's a reminder to many Bulgarians that there is a war, a massive war, going on not too far from them, just across this small sea in the middle of Europe. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Bulgaria, which is a short little bit of news, and we're now going to be moving up to Kyiv. Some of y'all may know that economics do win wars, and of course, that is no question. Historically, if your economy is incredibly good, then usually you're the one who will win a war. The Ukrainians, while having a decent economy, which is having a pretty rough time because of the war, much like the Russians are as well, although they're getting a large amount of support from the West, have also had some pretty difficult economic times. But we have seen them making sure that even during these economic times, to commemorate their soldiers with a special coin. We've actually seen the National Bank of Ukraine design a new mint here that will be commemorating the soldiers fighting for Ukraine and defending the entire country. I do have to say, it is a very cool coin. We can see here what appears to be an outline of a Ukrainian Cossack with, I believe, a saber and a shield. And then we can also see a Ukrainian soldier holding what appears to be an AS Val or an AK-74. I can't really tell. It kind of looks like a Val, honestly. But we can also see him wearing the paratrooper helmet, the infamous paratrooper helmet that y'all all know I have a little bit of a history with. Anyways, it's an incredibly cool coin. And I have to say, it is a well-deserving tribute to the Ukrainian soldiers, and hopefully this will remain in circulation for some time, so that way everyone in Ukraine can always remember the Ukrainian soldiers who defended their freedoms and defended their, I guess you could say, ability to use these coins whenever they look at them. And so, of course, a great little tribute to the Ukrainian soldiers. I hope that we do see this in the presses very soon. And with that, that's all the Kyiv news we have. We're kind of blowing through this a little quickly. But, of course, this is all just the bit of news, well, rather than the massive bits of news. The Bulgarian and Kyiv news are just leading us up into the location unknowns. And of course, everyone knows that while the locations of these pieces of news may be unknown, the videos are usually some of the most interesting ones of the night. And so with that, what do we have here? Here we could see a Ukrainian kamikaze drone hitting a truck as well as infantry. We were getting some kind of indications that this may have been in the Zaporizhia area, but once again, due to a lack of actual information as to where this was, we put it in the location unknowns. And so, here's the video. We'll have to mute that, but you can see the suicide drone hitting the front of the truck there, creating a little puff of smoke, and most likely knocking out the drivers if there were any inside. We can now see the drone looking at what appears to be tents that have been set up for the Russians as barracks. It appears that they have two tents here side by side, another tent down here, and then a larger tent that also has a bit of a slanted roof on it here in the back where my mouse cursor is. We can see the suicide drone fly in right there. You actually saw it flying in. There's the silhouette of it, if you can kind of see it. Flies in, slams right into the front of the tent, and from what we could tell, something like 3 Russian soldiers were killed. We can now see the rest of them running out of the tents like ants all over the place. And it seems like they're all just trying to go anywhere but there. We can now see them trying to combat the blaze of the suicide drone hitting the tent. The fire looks like it's being put relatively under control. Apparently, someone said that this is the actual attack that happened at the Enerhodar nuclear power plant. We weren't able to get enough information to confirm that, sadly, so it did fall under location unknowns, but we did get a suggestion that it occurred somewhere on the Zaporizhia front line. And so that may be the case, because I guess you could say the thickness of the smoke looked a lot like what we saw on footage from days ago of a supposed loitering drone hitting some kind of ammunition or some kind of Russian forces in that area. And so if that is the case, that is incredibly cool to know that we're actually seeing that aftermath and result here on film that the Ukrainians have finally released. And so with that, great footage to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians are still knocking out Russian forces all around the country, wherever they may be. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this bit of location unknown news, and we're now going to be moving into the next one, where we can see a Russian spotter correcting artillery fire. We're not really sure where this is, but the video does show what appears to be a Russian correcting artillery fire onto a Ukrainian position, although I do have to give the disclaimer, we do not really see the Ukrainian forces on the screen, and so it's really hard to confirm whether this is actually hitting Ukrainians or not. So with that, here's the video. You can see them looking through some kind of an infrared camera. We can see shells hitting this tree line here, and we see something that appears to be burning in the trees. And you see the emanating of heat. We hear the tank fire another shot, which then hits further down the tree line to the left. And once again, we're not seeing any billowing of smoke like a vehicle has been hit. All of the smoke you're seeing on film is from the explosion of the shell. And now firing another round. And that one does appear to have hit something. Correction. What we're seeing now, we're not really sure if it's still hitting anything. It appears that those are artillery shells coming in and exploding on the tree line as well. But once again, now that we know that, the heat from those explosions isn't the vehicle being hit, it's the artillery shells heat. We still don't see any evidence of Ukrainian forces being hit in this film.
Да, там сейчас не сладко. Посадки.
We hear the tank firing again. We don't even see where that round landed.
Да, да, да.
More artillery is coming in as well. But once again, rather than the smoke from the artillery shells exploding, we're not seeing any burning Ukrainian vehicles indicating that they're hitting anything, or any ammunition on fire for that matter either. So, did they hit Ukrainians or not? Probably not. We didn't see any evidence of it on film. Usually the Ukrainians, and I have to go through this speech again because I haven't said this in a while. Whenever we see Russian losses on film that the Ukrainians have, of course, made, the Ukrainians are incredibly thorough in documenting them. They usually show us videos of the rounds hitting, then they show us the aftermath, and usually it's completely uncut. It's just a raw bit of film showing the vehicle getting hit, then smoldering, and then burning. And so we always have evidence of Russian losses whenever the Ukrainians inflict them. However, with Russian footage, there's always this massive mystery as to whether they're even firing at anything. And this video is very similar to a lot of those, where you just watch the film, and it shows them obliterating a tree line, a house, a town, or something, but you never see the Ukrainians they're firing at, any vehicles being destroyed, or anything like that, of that matter. Very rarely do we ever get footage like that, and for once, it actually shows the Ukrainians taking incredibly minor casualties. But this is another one of those videos where we watch it, and you can see the Russians firing at something, but whether there's actually anything there or not is an entirely other question. Whether they're actually inflicting any damage is also a whole other question. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from this film. Just wanted to show it to y'all because it is war news, and if this is actually what the Russians are doing near the front lines, it may be showing that the Russians are wasting ammo on forces that may not even be there. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Russians firing a grenade launcher, and we have not seen footage like this in ages. And so, before we begin, a lot of y'all remember the Chechens from Mariupol. The Chechens from Mariupol never engaged in a firefight, except for at the very end of the battle, and they were always in an incredibly quiet place. The only fire you could hear on film was theirs, and they would just sit out in the open and do things that obviously made them look like they weren't under fire, and they weren't scared for their lives because they weren't being shot at. We can see something similar like this happening on film. A Russian soldier is about to fire this grenade launcher into this window that I'm circling with my mouse cursor. You're about to notice that he is sitting in the middle of an open tarmac, it seems, looking towards that window, and the only fire you'll hear on film is from the Russian soldiers out elsewhere. You don't hear fire coming back at them, and there isn't even any sign of life inside of this whole building. And so this whole thing looks staged, but I wanted to show it to you so that we could get a good laugh at the Russians staging videos again. And so here's the video. Well, let me actually go back real quick. Notice how they're peppering the window. That's the only fire you hear. There's nothing else going on anywhere. They then fire a grenade into the window. And explodes. And then fires another grenade into the building. Now notice this. He's standing in the wide open. There's no walls around. There's no cover. There's concealment in the bush, but there's no cover at all. And he's standing in the open where there's supposedly Ukrainians in this building, and the Ukrainians aren't even going to try and fire back at him with him being this close. This is some Razman Kadyrov crap again, where they sat there in Mariupol and tried to make it look like they were in firefights, and the Russians are back at it again, so that way they can try and appease the Russians at home and show them that they are doing something. You know, but they're doing really nothing, and once you look at it, it's obvious that they're not even firing at anyone that's even there. They're firing at ghosts. You see him peppering the window there, once again, in the wide open, nothing around to protect him, just sitting there spraying a window, and they've never gotten any return fire back. This video is BS, much like normal Russian propaganda, and while it is propaganda, I have to show this stuff to y'all, because there would be someone out there, and of course this is also to dispel that we are like a Ukrainian propaganda channel. There are people out there that would sit there and say, oh, the Russians fired a grenade into a house full of Ukrainians and you didn't show that video because you're pro-Ukrainian. And I am pro-Ukrainian, but we also show everything that we possibly can. And this is the kind of garbage, the kind of fodder that the Russians feed their own people and clowns out there believe. They actually believe that the Russians are firing at Ukrainians inside of that building. But as you can tell, there isn't even a firefight going on, and they're pretty much firing at these windows like it's target practice. And so with that, we are going to move on out of this bit of stupid propaganda, and we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Russian taking a nap, of course with the help of a Ukrainian drone. This video has been marked as NSFW. It was not marked as NSFW when I originally saw it, and I would have to believe that it really isn't. It doesn't show anything entirely graphic, but it does show a Ukrainian drone dropping a bomblet. So here's the video. When you see the drone moving forward, we can see the silhouette of the shadow of the Russian soldier right there. You see the drone continuing to move around. And also, look at that. That is a destroyed BTR-82 in that tree line. It's been there so long, it's rusted over. Usually when a vehicle burns, you can still see a little bit of camouflage. Usually they're just charred black and the paint's usually burned off. But when you see that this BTR-82, a Russian one, has been sitting here so long, it's rusted over. And the Russians, of course, in their all-being wisdom, return to the same location and post a soldier on the road right here. You can now see him wandering around. Looks like he tried to walk over to the other side of the street. We could see the Wii menu turn on, and the bomblet's already been dropped while the menu was up. And the bomblet lands right in front of the soldier. Hits him, and as far as we can tell, it takes him out. It wasn't an incredibly graphic video. I don't know why it was marked as NSFW, but we did see another Russian soldier being taken out, and while just one, it is more of a fear factor that a drone could be hovering above you that you couldn't see nor hear, and you could be taken out. The drones are kind of doing the job of snipers these days with these bomblets, which is just sowing fear amongst the ranks, which it's doing incredibly well, as we can see right here. And so with that is the end of that little video, and we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians field sniping a sniper rifle that they use. This thing is called a UAR-10, and just in case if y'all don't know what it is, because I don't actually know the specific rifle all too well, we can see that it is manufactured by the Zbroyar company, which is based off of the AR-10, which is a pretty interesting rifle. If y'all don't know the history about that, pull that up. It's incredibly interesting. So apparently these rifles were manufactured in 2012 in Ukraine. They're an entirely indigenous gun to Ukraine. And we can see one right here on display. And honestly, Matthew, I don't know about you, but this kind of looks like your Daniel Defense.
Yeah, a little bit. The rails are a little bit different, but generally pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close. The AR-10 and the AR-15 are somewhat similar. The AR-10 fires a .308 round, I believe. I want to make sure that I'm correct with that. It may just fire, let me make sure. Yeah, that would be a .308. It fires a .308 round instead of the .556. That's really the only difference in between the two. And we can also see here that this one also fires the .308 rounder called the 7.62 NATO. So by and large, it's just a Ukrainian manufactured version of, I guess you could call an AR-10. So with that, let's watch them field trip this gun and see how easy it is to take one of these apart. Taking apart guns in the field is very important for field cleaning, making sure that these things are good to go, because if you let grime and dirt build up in these things too much, then you start having issues like jamming and other sorts of problems like that. Now see him appearing to be putting firing pin back in, I believe. He's now putting the bolt back in. He's now putting the lower receiver back on. And now he's popped the pin back in, and he's now put the magazine back in. The rifle was disassembled and put all the way back together. That's not a complete strip down. Of course, if you strip the thing down a little bit more, it would have gotten a little bit more complicated. But that was a field strip, which is just done to make sure that you can clean the important parts of the rifle that need to be cleaned for the rifle to function. Just in case of y'all did not know, the AK-40, the AK-74, the AK series by and large, is known to be incredibly reliable in mud. The fact of the matter, well, actually, a lot of people say that it's reliable through anything and everything. But if you look at people who have gotten AKs and tested them, you can see a lot of people who've done that on YouTube with mud tests. You'll actually notice that the AK is more susceptible to mud and jamming because of it than an AR platform, which is very interesting to me because at the very beginning of the AK series lifespan, I guess you could call it, in 1949, it was known as an incredibly reliable gun that could really go through anything and it would keep on running. The M4, well, not really the M4, the M16, which I guess you could say was the ancestor to the AR as well, and that's a whole history. That's getting a little complicated. We won't get into that. But the M16, which I would say is the first mainstream AR platform, when it was introduced into Vietnam, was known as a very finicky rifle. It could pretty much stop firing and stop operating because of anything. If you looked at it the wrong way, it would stop working. Of course, they fixed those problems as time went by. Usually the first iteration of everything is terrible. And so now the M4, which is, I guess you could say, the updated version of the M16, is incredibly reliable and incredibly effective compared to the earlier versions. And while the AR-10 and also this, let me make sure I get the name correct, UAR-10 is a little different, than, of course, the normal M4, M16. It does use some of the same principles, and it is still really cool to see that the Ukrainians are starting to use these in mass. We're even starting to see M4s all over the field, just being carried like they're common rifles. They may be in Ukrainian calibers, but they're still an AR design, which I think is an incredibly cool thing. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some Polish-donated SPGs firing, and these aren't crabs. Y'all might be wondering, where are the crabs? Well, the Polish didn't just send over the crabs, they also sent over 2 S1s. The Ukrainians had these before the war, as well as the Russians, but the Polish did too, and they sent these over most likely because it would be incredibly easy for the Ukrainian artillerists to already be able to use this 2S1 because they already had these and had been trained on them. And so with that, here's a video of this Polish donated 2S1 firing. Pretty nice to see. Of course, it's wonderful to know that foreign countries have been donating massive amounts of equipment to the Ukrainians and helping them to keep this war going. And I hope we see even more foreign donated equipment in Ukraine and operational, including maybe a couple of wings, if y'all know what I mean. And so with that, we're now going to move on into the Kharkiv area and Belgrade area and cover the news there. But of course, before we get to that news, we have to take a quick little pause to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we're then going to move on into the Kharkiv and Belgrade area. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and moving into our first question segment of the night, we have a $50 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, what is the current status of the 2 million Ukraine citizens being held, if true, in Russia, and will they be repatriated back to Ukraine after the war? P.S. You and Matt are doing a great job. And thank you very much, Justice Ryan, for the compliment and the support.
And I thank you very much as well, Justice Ryan, for the support and also the comments of support. We're going to keep this thing going the best we can, and I thank you so much for enjoying it so far. But to answer that question, the unfortunate thing about the 2 million Ukrainians that may be within Russia is that we have no idea of their condition whatsoever. We hardly have an idea of what the prisoners of war are going through, and that also extends over to the 2 million Ukrainians that have been deported into Russia. So sadly, I can't really tell you about their condition or what will happen to them after the war. They will most likely be repatriated after the war. German prisoners of war is an example, kind of like a historical precedent. German prisoners of war that were captured or surrendered during World War II to the Soviet Union would be sent to gulags and such other camps like that within the Soviet Union. Eventually, all of them would be, well, all of them that survived would be returned to East Germany. Regardless whether they were from West Germany or not, they were all just thrown into East Germany. So that gives you a bit of an idea, and although, you know, the instance was a little different there, if that gives you a little bit of an idea, once this war ends, the Ukrainians will most likely try and get all of them back, and they most likely will be sent back. These 2 million additional bodies in Russia do cause an economic strain, regardless of how little the Russians are straining themselves to upkeep these people. They are putting a strain on the Russians, and on top of that, it's adding a whole new cultural element of 2 million Ukrainians that weren't there before, and so they'll probably be fairly eager to try and send them back just because of the economic costs of having them within Russia. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least gives a bit of an idea of what I'm thinking, but once again, take it with a grain of salt, because we have no idea what's going on with the Ukrainians, what the plans, what kind of plans the Russians have for them, or what will happen to them after the war. All of that's kind of up in the air right now, and sadly, there's just not a lot of information about those unfortunate Ukrainians that were sent into Russia. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support, Justice Ryan. It helps us to keep on running this channel, and without supporters like you and everyone else who supports this channel, we wouldn't be able to keep on running. Once again, just to make a note to everyone, we do run all of our videos and all of our streams ad-free, you know, because of course we don't want to torture y'all with ads. And so the only way we're able to support ourselves is through super chats. And so we are highly appreciative of all of y'all, because y'all are the only reason that we're able to keep going. There's nothing else behind, you know, well, not really behind the scenes, there's nothing else on this channel that helps us to keep running and supports us to keep these streams going and all of the other things that we do. And so with that, thank you once again, Justice Ryan, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $50 super chat from a channel legend, BC Skyman, who I didn't see sending a message, but maybe there will be one coming in shortly. He's still having the issue with the super chats, I think. But he sent us a super sticker of the YouTube character, I believe a pair, riding a firework and going off into the distance.
Matthew, we covered this before. It's Grimace.
That's right, yeah, Grimace.
Yeah, it's Grimace.
The McDonald's thing.
Grimace is riding an S-400 missile into the horizon, and then it explodes, killing Grimace. But I thank you very much for the support, BC Skyman. And I also highly recommend to all of y'all, if y'all haven't seen those little super stickers and all, take a look at it. It's right now in the live chat. It's at the very top. Click on that and watch it, because you will see a light blue version of Grimace meet his quick demise on top of a surface-to-air missile. And so thank you once again for the support, BC Skyman. It helps us out a massive deal, and it helps us to keep the stream running. And if you do have a question and you are still having a problem with sending in super chats, make sure to throw that question in, and we will have it answered as soon as we see it. And so with that, we're going to move on to the final question of this question segment, and then we're going to move on into the Kharkiv, Belgorod, and northern Donbass news.
And for the final super chat of the segment, we have a $22 donation from Duncan VR. And here we go, folks. Duncan always puts in interesting super chats, so here we go. He says, is Russia running out of manpower and supplies to keep the war going much longer? They don't want to conscript soldiers from the major cities, ? Also, hey, Matthew, yeehaw!
King, you actually distracted me with the animal sounds. Could you reread that first part real quick?
Yes, the first part is Russia running out of manpower and supplies to keep the war going much longer? They don't want to conscript soldiers from their major cities, ?
I think to answer that first part of the question, because I can answer that for sure, yes, they are running out of resources and manpower. Now, I will say, they're not running out of resources and manpower at the rate I originally thought they would be. At the very start of the war, at the onset of it, I thought that they were going to start running out of resources and manpower. Oh, let me try and get a good way to say this. Within 3 months. That's what I thought. But they've now gone on into 5. And while they may be struggling as far as we know, and they may hardly be hanging on right now, they have gone on farther than I anticipated. And so while they are definitely being ground down economically and resource-wise, I don't know how much longer they can actually last, because that seems to be something that is up in the air. Now, another thing I would like to say, and I would like to address this right now, speaking of which, is that there are people out there who, of course, are experts in the field, and they, of course, always have perfect comments to make about perfect timetables, and they just have everything figured out. One of those groups, and I hate to say it, is the MI6. Now, the MI6 is of course one of the best spy organizations in the world. It's, world renowned for it. The problem with that is that there is no indication, there's no true, I guess you could say, measurement to say how much longer the Russians can last. And so for them to say they're running out of steam is kind of a little difficult to say, because I do believe that they are grinding themselves down. I mean, like, the casualty numbers definitely show that. But to sit there and try and put, like they did today, I saw, or yesterday, an actual timetable of like a month or a month and a half is always a dangerous thing. Because it's actually putting a timetable on it where people are going to start counting down and waiting for the war to end in a month and a half. And so whenever I hear that kind of stuff, I'm always like, that's really questionable, because they may call themselves as experts, but who in the world knows when an arbitrary thing is going to end? Well, and I always say this is kind of a cop-out, but let me explain it. I always say there are loads of moving mechanisms behind the scenes that we cannot see that could lead this war to go on for several months, or it could lead it to go on for several years. And also that really goes with everything else. But let me explain a whole bunch of those moving mechanisms, and keep in mind, with each one I explain, one changing a little bit can change the outcome of every other one, and it's almost unpredictable with how everything will change. So let's just say some kind of an attempted coup happens on Putin, and they try to assassinate him, and a bomb is blown up in a building, and just like Hitler, he survives and comes out A-okay, but multiple generals are killed. That might rally the whole entire Russian public around Putin, and they have the, at least, moral support, the morale side in terms of support in the public to keep the war going. That can happen. And that will change everything. We may see that that countries become sympathetic to the Russians at that point. Or, for example, another thing could happen. We could see that Russian industry grinds to a halt, and then because of that one particular instance, when I say grind to a halt, I mean like mass shutdowns occur because supplies have just completely run out and there's no way to manufacture anything. That could lead to workers' revolts, which could lead to political unrest across the entire country, which could lead to the Russians having to peace out. And you can see how this is all affecting each other. We could see a million things, and I could go through all of them, but one small little thing, if y'all have ever heard of the butterfly effect, could affect the entire nation of Russia, and something in the West could also equally affect us as well. And so whenever someone tries to put down this timetable of a month and a half, it's like, what particular set of circumstances, what million separate pieces of little instances are you running off of to come up with that timetable? Because it's just too hard to come up with something like that. There's just too much stuff that could go on in the background to change that timetable that I never really give those out. And also another thing, speaking of mainstream news and quote-unquote experts saying stuff, there was a reliable news source that said that Vykospillyia had been encircled yesterday. They then came out and said that Vykospillyia had not been encircled. And then I'm hearing, of course, from other news sources that Vykospillyia is encircled and Russian troops are trying to retreat, or 50 or 60 of them have surrendered. And now y'all are starting to see why I usually never went with news sources from other people, and I always tried to vet them for myself and find picture or video evidence to make sure that they could work, because you can see why they're untrustworthy. Even other people that are my size that are trying to keep this thing reliable. Sometimes mistakes are made, but mistakes like that are huge. And now we have all kinds of people out there saying different stuff. None of it's verified with picture or video evidence. And so at this point, from what I've been able to tell, the Russians may have been pushed out of Vykospillyia and they may not have been encircled, but other people are saying that they have been encircled and 60 of them have surrendered. Some of them are saying that they've all been encircled of around 1,000 soldiers and they're asking for a green corridor out of the village. There's been loads of stuff being said, and that's why I usually never try and weigh in on that kind of stuff, because and also get into mainstream news or other people and what they're saying without any kind of video or picture evidence backup, because things like that can happen. And to kind of segue into one final thing before we round out this question segment, that's also why, up until this point, I had never relied on news sources from other people that were just written up, because there's just too much that people make up, like we saw right there. We're not really sure if it's even true anymore, and it's just tough to do that kind of stuff, because there's people out there that are all the time sitting there saying, well, I mean, like, you're not reporting on this happened, so-and-so said this, but what picture or video evidence do they have to back that up? That's why we always run off of picture and video evidence, so we don't run into stuff like this. And the whole reason we included that news article is because there had been a media blackout in the Kherson area, and we had no other way to report news rather than what people were saying. And now we're going to cut that out again, because the sources of the news we were getting were entirely unreliable. So with that,
and real quick, Enforcer, BC Skyman did just send in a question to go with his super chat, and I want to cover that before we move on, since we did just cover that super chat a moment ago, the donation. BC said, my buddy Marty has a question on how long will the war last. Will the A-10 Warthogs be effective in Ukraine, or will they be shot down? And before Enforcer answers that question, first up, big shout out to Marty. Welcome to the stream. And also your buddy BC Skyman is quite a legend around here. So it's good that you know him, and we're glad to have both of you.
And yes, I thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman, and also your friend as well for watching. Now, to answer that question, I kind of went through this just a second ago. I actually kind of answered it. To guesstimate when this war will end to a precise date or a month would be too difficult, because there's just too much moving stuff in the background. And I'll save us that conversation again, because I kind of went through that. So I can't really give you a specific timetable of the month the war will end, but I can give you a bit of a window. We know for sure that the war is going to go on for about another 3 months. That is guaranteed. We do not know how much longer it'll go on beyond that. So it could end at the end of 3 months, or the farthest I see it going would be another year or another year and a half, and the farthest out a year and a half. So the war could end anytime, in my opinion, and between 3 months from now and a year and a half from now. with 3 months being the shortest date if everything went well and the Russians just fell apart behind the scenes and were having massive issues, and about a year and a half out if for some reason the Russians were able to hold everything together like glue, and then the pressures finally caught up to them about a year and a half from now. And that's kind of the timetable I'm looking at, but once again, take it with a grain of salt, because much like the MI6, there's not a lot to base that off of, and many things could change. It could go on for 4 years. It could go on even longer than that. But that's kind of my guesstimate right now of how much longer this war could last at its shortest or its farthest. And so with that, I hope that does answer that part of the question. And also the question about the A-10s making a difference. It's just really tough to say, because, oh man, I mean, like, I would really have to comb over a lot of information about how the A-10s fought in Iraq. Afghanistan doesn't really count because the Afghans hardly even had anything that could be used against an A-10. Well, actually, they had nothing that could be used against an A-10, but Iraq did. So that kind of lays out a precedent that if a country that the A-10s are being used against has some kind of surface-to-air missile defense systems, how often are they shot down per sortie? And that would be a great number to figure out. So I'm going to try and see if we can comb over some information to figure out how effective they would be. But my offhand, well, my kind of like original impression of them, I guess you could call it, would be that the A-10s wouldn't do all too well. Because the problem is that the A-10's gun, and I know that we had some debate on this, it's okay. It's usually used against trucks, soft targets, and in houses and buildings and stuff, things that could be punctured really easily. And actually, just to pull that up, how effective is the GAU 30mm? The GAU 8 Avenger. We'll just pull that up real quick. It's extremely accurate as in what? What's the spread? Let's see, half the time, let's see, we want to, can a GAU destroy a tank? It might not be able to penetrate the chopping hull of an M1, well, obviously not, but it can destroy fuel tank's engine. So I would say, how apparent, we're trying to find some actual statistics on this gun here. So we got Guns Fandom. We'll try this, because Guns Fandom is usually somewhat accurate. Specifications: 80% of rounds fired at 1,200 meters hit within a 40-foot diameter circle. So you would really have to be under a mile from the target, and the shells fired from that, the rounds fired from that cannon will all fall within a 40-foot diameter. So I believe that they would hit the length of the tank from the front to the back for the most part, with maybe a few rounds going in front and behind. Let's see, armor piercing, of course we know about that, but what about the penetration values? Attack angle at 30 degrees. Now this is the attack angle at 30 degrees, and this is the level of penetration that you're going to get with those rounds. At the maximum firing range, which is where the gun is most likely going to be firing at, it gets 55 millimeters of penetration. Now, to give y'all an idea of how thick tank's armor could be, I believe the side plates of an M1 Abrams, as far as we know, based off of public information, is somewhere around 70 millimeters. So if you got closer, you may be able to actually puncture through the side armor of an M1 Abrams, maybe. From the top, certainly, you could always puncture the top with anything. But, man, flying at a low altitude, you would most likely be at some, and this is getting really technical, and I'm sorry about this and nerding out for all of y'all, but if it was at a 3-degree descent towards the target, because it's flying incredibly low, so it can't do anything like 30 degrees or whatnot, and it's firing directly at the side of a tank at 1,200 meters with only 55 millimeters of penetration, it's questionable whether it'd even take out the engine. It might be able to knock out a track, now that it could do, but knocking out an engine or anything critically important to a tank is going to be highly questionable. So then that brings the A-10 into the category of, well, what about the guided weapons? And then most of the guided weapons, like the laser-guided bombs and such things like that, they require altitude to work. And that's something that you were not afforded in this war because of the surface-to-air missile systems. Pretty much everything has to fly at treetop level. And so in all of those cases, and looking at it like that, I just don't think that the A-10 would be too effective. But then again, we are seeing Su-25s being used effectively. You could just strap these A-10s up with unguided rockets, tilt them upwards at an angle, and fire them off, and that would do the trick in some cases. but I don't think you'd be able to use the A-10 to its full potential just because of the risks of having it shot down by surface-to-air missiles. So I hope that kind of answers that question, BC Skyman. That was a really deep dive. I think that's about as technical as I've ever gotten to answering a question recently. But with that, we are at the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat, do not fret. We will get to all of them by the end of the night. But we're now going to move on into the Kharkiv, Belgorod, and northern Donbass area. And once we cover all of that news, we'll then move into the next question segment before we get to the Donetsk news. And so with that, we are now going to move into the area of Belgorod, where I'd like to show y'all a very fortunate sight for us. Some of y'all have been wondering, how long will the Russians last? Is the Russian economy looking good? And I would say no. Due to Russian budget cuts, we've seen that the Russians have now adopted a brand new surface-to-air missile defense system against helicopters, that being the bow and arrow. And so, here's the video of... I'm not really sure if this was taken by a Ukrainian or a Russian, but what is joked to be new Russian air defenses in the Belgorod area. Here's the video.
Соколиный глаз, ебать, сейчас будем сбивать вертолет.
Man, dude, this guy actually fired an arrow at a helicopter.
Let's see it again.
Look, he cleans it up.
Did he hit it though?
No, he didn't hit it for sure, but that was still insane. Anyways, the Russians are having a little bit of budgetary issues right now, and they're trying to find out a way to shoot down helicopters without being incredibly expensive. And I believe with it being this cheap, I don't think they really have a chance. But with that, that's the end of that little video. Just really a funny one. Don't take it seriously. It's just a little bit of a gaffe or a laugh, I guess you could say. And with that, we're now going to move on out of the Belgorod area, which we have no other news to report from. And we're now going to move towards Kharkiv, where we have seen the Ukrainians firing into the salient north of the city. It apparently looks like they're using SPG-9s, like a small artillery battery. Really cool use of them. These things are also pretty effective as well. They have 550 millimeters of penetration with the more modern rounds. And not to get too nerdy or anything for the rest of the night, but that is actually pretty decent, especially for an antiquated anti-tank gun system, well, recoilless gun system like this. So, with that, here's the video.
Пятница хороший. Залпом! 333! Огонь!
You see them firing, you hear the distinctive little ring from the recoilless
Красиво
guns.
пошло! Давай, давай, давай! По контактам взяли!
They're now reloading.
Беглым! Поехали!
And so far during this war, I have not seen SPG-9s used
Красиво,
like
блядь!
this.
27 плюс ожидаем.
Давай, я прям возбудился!
Емчик один.
Ай, молодец. Я тебе за это рубль дам.
Готов? Готов.
Молодцы! Давай по-братски помогаем! По контактам его, раз! Пошел!
Man, this little ring makes me feel like we're getting tinnitus just watching the video.
Ай, хорошо!
7-й, Емчик, пятница, начинаем. Плюс.
Пятница начинаем. Поехали! Пятница танцует уже!
We now see them packing up the SPG-9 over there. They're already trying to lift it off of the tripod and get it back moving. But it's very interesting to see Ukrainians using SPG-9s like artillery pieces. Sure, it works. There's no question about that. It's firing your round down range, probably miles, and slamming somewhere near Russians, most likely corrected by a drone. But we've never seen anything like this before in the war by either side. And so, fairly interesting and a fairly creative use of how to actually use an SPG-9. Of course, if this was the Russians, I would be saying, oh, look, you know, it's a world superpower getting down to having to use SPG-9s, which are anti-tank recoilless guns, as artillery pieces. But with the Ukrainians, of course, having a minute budget, This is actually a very creative and industrious use of their SPG-9s to, of course, try and inflict casualties on the Russians. We did not see if these rounds actually hit downrange and caused any casualties, but it was cool to see them being used like this, and I hope that they did inflict some kind of casualties further down the range. With that, we're now going to be moving into Kharkiv, where, of course, I have to remind you all of a somewhat unfortunate scene before we move on to the news south of the city. The Kharkiv market was once again attacked overnight, and a person was killed, at least one person. I believe the numbers are still coming in, and dozens were wounded. I want to show you all this picture because while we don't see these a lot anymore, one always has to be reminded of what the Russians are doing to the Ukrainians to explain why this war is still going on, because sometimes this can be lost on people as to what this war is really being fought for. And the war is being fought because of scenes like this. This is the husband of this woman, and she is grieving and freaking out right now because her husband was just killed in a Russian missile attack. Around 21 people, according to this post, were wounded, including 4 children, but as far as we can see, the one man, well, apparently 2 people were killed, including the husband of this woman. And this is what this war is being fought for. It's being fought to defend Ukraine, and it's being fought to defend people like these who are trying to go about their daily lives in Ukraine, that the Russians are deliberately going out of their way to target and treat with the lowest respect, treat it worse than an animal. And just in case the people don't actually believe that this is what the Russians will do to Ukrainians if they were actually able to successfully invade this country, I will have to remind y'all of the scenes we saw in the Bucha Hospital airport area when those towns got liberated, and we saw that the Russians had tied people's hands and legs behind their backs and shot them in the head, tied them up in ropes like they were a group of prisoners, and took them behind a building and hosed them down with machine guns. There are loads of things that happen in the Bucha Hospital airport area to show us that once the Russians occupy an area for long enough, they start committing genocide against the Ukrainians that live there. This is what we would see. This would be a daily sight around the entirety of the country if the Russians were actually successful in taking it over. And this is what the Ukrainians are fighting for, is to make sure that these scenes will be few and far in between and won't last forever. With that, that's the end of this little clip of news. Of course, an unfortunate bit to see. And we're now going to move south of the city of Kharkiv, where we've also seen a little bit of good news, where we've seen the training of new Ukrainian units somewhere in the Kharkiv region. Of course, credit for this video goes to Radio Free Europe, who, of course, has been providing us with incredible video evidence of what's been going on in Ukraine. And so, without further ado, here's the video of Ukrainian soldiers training south of the Kharkiv area.
Граната осколочным залпом! По пидорасам 333!
And you hear that little ring from the SPG-9 again.
На 350. Понял? Установи сам и смотри сам. Только рукой теперь тут немножко агрессии. У тебя тут темна куча железа, понял, да? Поступила на озброєння за наземну зброю, як протитанкова, так і міномети. Зараз проводимо навчання наших хлопців для того, щоб вони упевнено могли працювати вже на нулях.
You now see them learning how to use the SPG-9 and the shells it comes with. And we have, really quick, to cover this little subtitle right here. This has a lot more impact to it than just these words. It says, ammunition depots far from the front have been hit, they say, slowing the enemy shelling. We haven't been able to get actual metrics on this because this is something that you can't really record on video or picture, but we have heard that Russian shelling has decreased by, I believe, something like 40 to 50% as far as we've been told, and the numbers suggest. It went from thousands of rounds a day to a few thousand rounds a day. While we don't have an exact figure, back when I was reading it, I was like, that seems somewhat believable. And we've also heard at the same time that the Ukrainians are getting loads of ammunition from Western partners like the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and so on, and also new artillery systems, and the amount of artillery shells they are firing per day is climbing We've also heard, although we haven't been able to confirm this, that Ukrainian casualties may have been brought down to around 30 per day. When I say 30, I mean 30 killed, not 30 killed and wounded. Around 30 killed per day, where it used to be around 100 to 150. So it does seem that on the casualty side of things, as well as the overwhelming firepower side of things, the war may be shifting in Ukraine's advantage in this area as well. And so, while this is just a quick little sentence here on screen, there is a lot more behind it than what meets the eye. But with that, I'm going to let the video continue. We can now see them preparing the potatoes. Whoops, I think those are your mortar shells. I'm just kidding. Of course they were mortar shells.
TikTok сфотала. TikTok на зв'язок.
Грім дачі.
3 рази.
Бля, я пішов.
По базам забезпечень. Дуже близьких і дуже хороших хлопців втрачаємо тут. І дуже багато вже моїх побратимів, кого я знав. І з ким я був, і з Ірпеня ще. Ми приїхали сюди. Якось, не знаю. Неприємно на душі. Дуже неприємно. Але приходиться з тим жити, бо
An interesting video showing that more Ukrainian soldiers are being trained on some of the newer weapons, which they'll be sent to the front to, and hopefully will use incredibly effectively, combined with their good training. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv area, where we've heard of no offensive action beyond the small instance we saw of the Ukrainians firing the SPG-9s into the salient, and we also haven't heard any news from the Chuhuiv area as well. It appears that action is completely stalled in this area. We've also not heard anything from the illustrious 93rd Brigade, which is around the BLOCKADE area. As far as we can tell here, action has also stopped. It seems that things are falling incredibly quiet. The Russians are not conducting anything in these areas. The Ukrainians seem to not be conducting anything here either. And so, in that regard, this line has fallen completely silent. We're now going to be moving further south, and we have also not heard of any news in the Izium or these Lyman and Slovyansk direction. Of course, this is to be expected as the Russians have reached the river, and we have seen, and apparently they have also learned, that river crossings are incredibly dangerous and have never really resulted in any successful attempt. And so it appears that they're not going to be trying that anywhere where they're on the length of the Seversky Donetsk River. And so, logically, this front line has fallen silent as well. But we have gotten a little bit of news from the area on the river. We don't know where on the river. This marker is not accurate whatsoever, and it's deliberately made this way. But we can see Ukrainians crossing the river to attack the Russians on the other side. That kind of sounds like a chicken crossing the road joke, but it's in all seriousness. So I'm going to let y'all see this video of the Ukrainians crossing the river to attack the Russians. Actually gonna turn that down a little bit for a second and check if it has copyrighted music again in a second. Well, we can see them moving through some debris of a destroyed house. Hardly even looks like a house anymore. And they're now moving through the destroyed ruins of what appears to be an entire village. Music is still playing. We can see the river there in the distance. You see the foundations of, I don't believe that used to be a house, because it doesn't really appear like there's a lot of rubble there. But we now see them appearing to set up. It seems like some soldiers are leveling their guns to look across the river. And now we can hear a firefight ongoing. It appears that the soldier just fired an RPG-7, and it's now being reloaded. Then they've now fired an RPG at the other side of the river again. And it seems like another soldier just fired one above them. They're now repositioning while some soldiers are still firing across the river. We see another soldier run up with an RPG-7. Prepare to fire it. And then he fires it. In a second, it looks like he's repositioning again. You see the machine gunner laying down fire. The RPG just hit on the other side of the banks of the river. They are now running down the dirt path in the village. Looks like a soldier was handing off an AK to the man filming. You now see them moving through a trail in the woods. With that, that's the end of the video, but of course an interesting one to see, and it is interesting to show that Ukrainian forces are skirmishing with the Russians over the river. We didn't see them cross. It appears that that was a little bit of a, I guess you could say, oh, well, I misread it. It was a group of Russians across the river. They didn't cross it, but they did fire across the river to the other side at the Russians. It is interesting to see that the Ukrainian forces actually instigated the skirmish, showing that it was planned by the Ukrainians and that they were hoping to inflict casualties on the Russians on the other side and maybe keep them a little bit disorganized. This, of course, is opposite to what the Russians would make you believe, which is that the Ukrainians are on the receiving end of the Russian punishment, and it looks like it's the complete opposite. It looks like the Russians are on the receiving end of the Ukrainians whenever the Ukrainians decide that they're going to attack them. So a great video to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians are still keeping up a little bit of pressure on the Russians in this area and making sure that they know that they're not completely unopposed in their occupation. Well, that we're now going to be moving down to the town of Kramatorsk, where we actually have two separate bits of news. And I actually got a translation for this one before I got this video on air, and apparently what this woman here is doing, and she's in the town of Kramatorsk, she's been told that there's an old man in a village further up the way that is running out of food and supplies because pretty much everyone's left and there's no food and supplies there anymore. And so what she's doing is that she's going to go around the grocery store and load up with food and provisions that that man could use so that way it could be sent to him. And this is a rare instance right here. We haven't seen this a lot on film, where Ukrainians are helping Ukrainians and making sure to take care of each other. We can see her handing out the groceries to the man who lives in the village further up the way. And that's the end of the video right there. A very nice little move from that Ukrainian lady. And of course, and we all know that that man is, of course, highly appreciative of that support and will be able to live off of it for days coming after the war. Well, as the war goes on, I mean, correction. With that, we're now going to be moving on to a second site from Kramatorsk. While we saw a nice grocery store in that image, and the entire town of Kramatorsk has not been destroyed by artillery barrage as of yet, there are some places in the town that have been completely destroyed, leaving some people to have to leave for who knows how long. We can see an old man here in his Lada, preparing to leave what used to be his home. All of the buildings around have been destroyed. He's packed up the last of his belongings, and we can see that it looks like the poor man hasn't been able to even shower in some while, as probably the water mains have been busted out quite some while ago. It's a sad thing to see. And who knows if this man will ever be able to return to Kramatorsk, or if he'll ever have a home to return to. Maybe he'll leave and never come back. And his entire life, he may have grown up here, his whole life, and he'll never be able to return to the place that he called home. And this is what the Russians are doing to average people. And so, of course, you can understand the sympathy that the Ukrainians have, and I know that all of y'all as well have loads of sympathy for the Ukrainians and their plight, much like this poor man here having to leave his home after being here for who knows how long. Most Ukrainians, as far as I've seen on film, whenever people have traveled to Ukraine, usually live in one place and stay there their entire lives. And so pretty much, if we're going off of that assumption, this man and his entire life has been uprooted forever, most likely. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this area, and we're now going to be moving more towards the front lines and more towards Lysychansk, where we have seen today that 8 Mr. Bs were destroyed in a single artillery barrage by the Ukrainians. 8 Mr. Bs. Usually a battery consists of 4 artillery pieces, which means that 2 entire Russian artillery batteries were destroyed in this single clip. And so, without further ado, let me show you all this. Here are the 8 Mr. Bs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, you see that there's another box down here that says VK on it. I don't know what that's for, but we can also see a truck right here. It looks like it's a Euro 4320 that's there with the Mr. Bs. None of this will last too long. The Ukrainians are going to obliterate this stuff, and an entire A whole freaking 2 batteries of Russian artillery is about to be wiped out right in front of our eyes. How does this kind of incompetence keep eluding the Russians? How in the world can they keep letting this stupidity get to them? It's like they haven't grown a single brain cell or a single lick of knowledge over the course of this entire war. It is asinine and suicidal to just set up 8 Mr. Bs in the woods. They don't even have them set up to move. There's not enough vehicles there to tow them out of that area, and to just set them up there until they eventually get found and all destroyed in mass. This kind of stupidity is unfathomable. I just can't believe that there are people like that out there, and it seems like the Russian army is just rife with them. And of course, smoke's billowing out of the area where the Mr. Bs once were, which lets us know that all 8 of them were destroyed along with the truck and whatever was south of them in the video. It's wonderful to know that the Russians are so stupid that they can just throw away 2 entire batteries in a single clip. I mean, like, you know, what other war could you imagine that to happen? And I actually saw something funny, and I thought this was hilarious, is that someone had made a video. I'm not going to say who because I don't ever want to start beef, but I watched this video because I was kind of interested in it. And they said that in World War II, the Soviet Union valued lives. And I found that to be a big joke. And, you know, of course, they talked about enemy at the gates, which, of course, is a huge misrepresentation of how the Battle of Stalingrad was fought. The one with rifle shoots thing is an entire myth. But still, at the same time, to act like the Russians value life, resources, or anything is a little silly, because this whole entire war has shown us that that's definitely not the case. We just saw them put 8 Mr. Bs in that one spot, and we also saw a video a while ago, just as a single instance, and we can come up with loads of them after this, of 4 Russian tanks running into a minefield, driving over the same spot in the road where the minefield was, and being destroyed one after the other. And then a 5th tank looking at all the destroyed comrades in front of it, all of the killed crew members that were inside of those tanks, decided, I'm going to try that too. And then it drives through the only remaining gap on the road, runs over a mine, and the tank blows up. You can't tell me that the Russians value anything with this kind of record. If they valued anything, they would give their soldiers a little bit of intelligence to not do stupid things like this, or at least the field commanders enough intelligence to reprimand the lower enlisted soldiers when they do something like this. And this, of course, is not entirely on the lower enlisted. This is on the officers. Well, entirely the officer corps of the Russian army. They hardly have any NCOs. All of them are officers. And so this is entirely on them, and this is a failing from the very top of the Russian army. And you're seeing it coalesce on film. You can't make this stuff up. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this clip, which just showed baffling levels of stupidity by the Russians, and of course, a great cause of celebration for the Ukrainians. And we're now going to be moving further south towards the area of Avdiivka, where we've seen a Stugna being fired by, I believe, the 58th Independent Motorized Infantry Brigade. Quite a mouthful. Anyways, here's the video.
Щось несуть. Куди? Там он двоє щось несуть, бачиш? Це двоє. І вон толпа йде. Раз, два, три. Все.
We now see that the Stugna has been fired, and is traveling towards another one of these expendable Russian tanks.
Нижче.
Dead on it. Little chuckle from the Ukrainian soldier. And the video ends right there. Another Russian tank destroyed. Another one wiped out. And of course, it helps the Ukrainians to hold the line and eventually turn the tide and push the Russians back out of the country. Well, the kind of news we've been getting these days, especially with the HIMARS being in the country and destroying all of the, I guess you could say, support infrastructure behind the lines that have been keeping the Russians going, I would say that the war is definitely going to be taking a turn. And these kinds of videos are going to become more and more infrequent. They're going to happen less. Stugnas are, in their own way, largely a defensive weapon. They have to be set up, of course, in advance. The crew sits there behind cover, away from the launcher, and operates it from there. Its entire, I guess you could say, its entire way it operates is very defensive in purpose. And so I think we're going to see less use of Stugnas, and we're going to start seeing more use of those Western systems that we saw at the very beginning of the war, like javelins and in-laws, which are mobile, and while putting the crew at a little bit of a greater risk, they could be used in an offensive much easier than the setup of a Stugna would. But still, that's just my opinion. These things, of course, could be used in certain situations, and even in all situations. It just wouldn't be as effective as it is during a defensive like this. But still, great to see, and I hope that we begin to see these kinds of losses that the Russians are taking as the Ukrainians are pushing them back out of the country here within the next few weeks. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the next bit of news near the Bakhmut area, where we have seen Ukrainian artillery somewhere in the Lysychansk pocket, well, the Lysychansk finger, still operating, and we can see that here on film. That's the end of the video, but it's great to see Ukrainian artillery still operating, and a BM-21 Grad at that. We've seen that for quite some while during this war. And with that, we're now moving from that news into our final bit of news from the Luhansk area. This is really the Donetsk area, but we're still going to call it the Luhansk area. This news comes from Avdiivka, where we saw Russian artillery slamming the area of Avdiivka that the Ukrainians controlled. Well, still control, actually. And so here's the video of Russian artillery raining down the area, which is a very rare instance. We hardly see anyone engage in any kind of action here. And so the fact that the Russians are even bombarding anything claimed to be in the Avdiivka area is something new. And so here's the video. And of course, they throw in some crazy sounding music. We can see what appeared to be a BMP-2 right there. But it looked like it had some white markings on it, which was a little odd. We can now see them, of course, going through their typical level of village artillery routine. Notice how inaccurate Russian artillery fire is. This isn't an MLRS. These are actual towed artillery pieces, or SPGs, firing at such an inaccurate spread. Just look at that. It's like from World War II. This is pitiful. I mean, like, watching this entire artillery video, and it's got epic music over it. I'll play it for a second. They're trying to play cool music over it to make it look impressive. But with this kind of spread, this is an embarrassment. Just look at this. It's sad. I mean, like, they shouldn't even show these kinds of videos. If they can't hit targets dead on with precision, this is a joke. The modern world doesn't revolve around, I guess you could say, massive shows of firepower like this anymore. The modern world and how war works now relies on precision strikes that impose as little civilian casualties, or none, as much as possible. And the Russians pride themselves on these kinds of idiotic and wasteful artillery barrages that hit nothing but look impressive on film. It's sad. It's pitiful. If you pulled up World War I footage of trench warfare, that's what you would see. And if you pull up World War II artillery footage, that's what you would see. And we're now 70 years later. Artillery technology has advanced incredibly since then, to the point you can hit a hair on a mouse 10 miles away, and the Russians are still bombarding areas like it's World War II. It's pitiful, it's sad, it's a poor display of artillerymanship, especially in this modern age. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk area, well, the Luhansk area, and we're now going to be moving down into the Donetsk area. But, of course, before we get there, we have covered this entire area, and we do have to give a quick little analysis. This area has, by and large, of course, fallen silent, and we do not have any suggestions of a pickup of Russian activity in this area or any Ukrainian offensives to occur in the future. And so now that we've given that disclaimer about what that area looks like, we're now going to be moving down into the Donetsk area. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick little pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into our final news segment of the night, including the Donetsk, Kherson, and the speech from President Zelensky, as well as this little piece of news in the middle of the country. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and it is now time for the second question segment of the night. And up first, we have a very generous $200 super chat from Rob ICXman, I believe it said, who says, "Enforcer, I'm a longtime listener. Day 11, ex-military nuclear ballistic missile submarine service. I doubt Russia would be so stupid. I rarely comment. I am a patriot, much older and in excellent shape, willing to fight for any democracy as a patriot, has no age limit. FYI, great stream.
Well, thank you so much for the massive support, Rob. And of course, it's totally fine if you don't comment a lot. Some of our viewers don't comment much. Some people watch it on TV, and so that's totally fine. I get it. But thank you once again for the massive support. And of course, it's always cool to hear that we have loads of veterans in here. I of course get things wrong every once in a while, but it's of course a high honor to me that a lot of people who do have former military service find what I say to be very reasonable and founded within some kind of a logic or fact, which is very nice to know. And I thank you once again for the support. And it is really cool that you're a ballistic missile, a nuclear ballistic missile submariner, I guess is the best way to say that. That is incredibly cool. There's not a lot of people who have been in the service, and much less in the submarine in the Navy. So I would have to say that is a really cool position, actually. Also, I doubt Russia would be so stupid. I don't know what that's addressed to, but if you're talking about a nuclear onslaught, since you did serve on a ballistic missile submarine, I would agree. I don't believe the Russians would be too stupid to end up with mutually assured destruction, because they're not going to win. They're really not going to win either way at this point, and so nuking the West will just speed that up a little bit. So if you're talking about that, I can 100% agree. Also, it's good to hear that you are a patriot. I'm trying to make sure I go through and address all of this. It's good to hear that you are a patriot. Of course, it's always wonderful to support the team. I always think that it's nice for everyone to always get behind their team, and regardless of who they are, what they're doing, just make sure to back it up and try and get the whole thing done through. And so it's good to hear you're a patriot and that you would fight for democracy and freedom around the world, regardless of where it be and who the people are, because the Ukrainians certainly need a lot of people like them, like that, backing them up. And so with that, thank you once again, Rob, for the massive amount of support, and thank you so much for enjoying the stream, because we try our best to make sure that these streams are informational, they're good, and also to make sure that they're watchable to everyone out there. You know, we don't want to make it sound, and you know, that's why I was kind of feeling bad with the A10 spiel earlier, is that I was getting incredibly technical and probably went over a lot of people's heads, and that's no problem. That's not saying that people are ignorant or anything. It's just saying that people haven't been brought up to speed in that kind of little niche thing. But you know, I try and keep it you know, informational and a little deep, but not so deep that it loses people, which I've seen some streams do. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I'm so glad that you have been enjoying the stream. And if we could get an LSA from all the veterans who are watching that do have the live chat up and can comment pretty easily, that would be pretty cool to see how many veterans we have in here watching right now. And also, just for now, I know that everyone loves to throw out LSA, but for now, let's just make sure that only the veterans say it, because I would like to see how many there are. And so with that, thank you once again for the massive support, Rob, and I'm glad that there are people out there like you in the world that will support Ukraine. And with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you once again.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Joe, who leaves a donation of $30 and does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Joe, for that generosity, and thank you so much for supporting the stream. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything to that one?
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Joe. Of course, there's not really a lot to comment on. There's no comment or anything. But of course, thank you once again so much for the support. It's highly appreciated by me and Matthew, and it helps us to run these streams. And without support like that, these streams wouldn't be possible. And so thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Douglas Newman, who says, "Great job, guys. I look forward to your show, even if I have to watch it after the fact. I saw that no tank kills were documented today. Even so, getting closer to that 2,000 mark."
2,000 mark as in?
Maybe 2,000 destroyed?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That went over my head. We didn't see any... Well, we did see a Russian tank confirmed destroyed today, right near the Avdiivka area. This little link right here will take you to a Stugna destroying a Russian tank. So we did see a tank destroyed right there, and I think we may have seen... I think a couple. I think there may have been one in the location unknowns, but I'm not really sure. I can't really remember. But we did see one destroyed today. And just real quick, we will pull up the Kyiv Independent. We're going to go take a look at them. The Kyiv Independent on Twitter. Hopefully it pulls up Enforcer. Yep, there we go. And let's scroll through here real quick to see the casualty count, because the Kyiv Independent usually puts out an incredibly accurate one. So let's scroll down. Let's scroll down. They've been putting on a lot today. And also, look, they've made Lego figures. Someone out there is making Lego minifigures based off of people in the Ukraine war. Like these are the commanders, and I guess you could say, well, yeah, the top commanders of the Azov battalion that was in the Azovstal. Kind of weird, really. But we're going to keep on going. Let's see, there's an intelligence update from the UK MOD. And here's the casualty report for today. So we see that, of course, according to them, the Russians have not lost a tank today, but we did see one destroyed on film by a Stugna. We saw that another 150 troops, 39,000! They've reached it. They've reached it to 39,000. They're now 1,000 away from 40,000 Russian troops killed. Of course, death isn't really something to celebrate about all too much, but when you're in a war, these kinds of numbers mean that the war may end even sooner. And so, as morbid as it sounds, the numbers climbing do kind of help out in a way. We can see that it is gotten up to 1,704 tanks destroyed, which is pretty good. So I would say that they are kind of rounding up their way a little bit closer to 2,000 with each day, although today is definitely not that day. But we won't go over the rest of the casualty stats. I'll just show these here on stream for a little bit, just for those of y'all to see, and then we're going to be getting off of it. And so it is interesting to see that they are getting close to 2,000, and so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the last question of this question segment, and after we cover it, we'll then be moving on into the Donetsk, Kherson, the middle of the country, and President Zelensky's speech.
All right, and for the final one of the segment, it is a $20 super chat from BSG Wolf, who says, if the U.S. government is thinking of sending Western fighter jets, could that be a hint that they think war could last years?
It might be. It's really hard to tell. They could be using this opportunity to take some of their retired aircraft and send them somewhere. That's kind of what the United States commonly does, is if we're ever phasing out weapons, we usually just send them to the people who need them the most at the time. Like when we were getting rid of the M1 Garens, believe it or not, we would just give them to everyone. We gave them to the South Koreans, the South Vietnamese, we gave them to the Philippines, we gave them to anyone who would take them. And so, in that instance, I feel like really, this may be an attempt to get some of the older American aircraft out of service in the U.S. Air Force and send them somewhere that they can still be used, so that way they don't just end up in a boneyard out in the middle of the desert in America. So I think it could be an indication that they believe it could last years, but at the same time, they may just see an opportunity that regardless however long this war lasts, that the aircraft they're about to retire can go somewhere. And so with that, I hope that does address that question, BSG Wolf. It's an incredibly good one, and depending on which way you look at it, you can really come up with either answer. And so with that, I hope that does kind of answer the question, at least in my opinion, and what I'm thinking. And of course, I want to let everyone know I'm not an expert at everything. So whenever I say things like that are kind of arbitrary and you can have an opinion on, just keep in mind, I could be wrong. I may not be considering all of the information there is out there. And so I just want y'all to remember to keep that in consideration whenever I air anything like that. But of course, just take my opinion as it is. It's an opinion, but that's what I'm thinking right now about the U.S. potentially sending aircraft over. And so with that, we are going to move on out of this question segment, and we're going to move on into the Donetsk area, the Kherson area, the center of the country, and the speech from President Zelensky. And after we get to that speech, that will be rounding out tonight's news. But before we move on, I saw that 673 of y'all voted in a poll, and surprisingly enough, the figures have gone up. So if you would like to cover that, Matthew, please go ahead.
So yes, I ran a poll just a short while ago. It just ended, like you said, with 673 votes. The question was, are you a veteran of the armed services? It looks like 31% said, yes, I am a veteran, and 68% said, no, I am not a veteran. So we have 31% veterans in the Leaf Spring Army.
And what's crazy is that number went up from, I believe, 20%.
I think so. I think it has gone up.
Yeah, and so we went from 1 in every 5 people watching the stream was a veteran or currently serving, so now it's 1 in every 3 people watching the stream is a veteran or currently serving. And so that's wild, actually. It's been going up. And of course, to all of the veterans and currently serving out there, highly honored that y'all do find this a reliable source of news that isn't just peddling and, goop and, just straight up mistruths. And so with that, thank you all once again for watching. And of course, if everyone would like to give a little thank you to all of those veterans and currently serving out there, they too would defend the United States if we found ourselves in a similar situation. And if called upon for some reason, if things were to get worse, they would also go over there and fight the Russians. And so with that, we're not going to get into that little thing that I just said there. That's a whole rabbit hole of its own. But with that, we're now going to be moving into the Donetsk area, the Kherson area, the center of the country, and the speech from Zelensky. Starting off in the Donetsk area, we did see that artillery is still being used in the Avdiivka area, showing that there is some kind of an artillery battle that the Ukrainians and the Russians may be getting involved in here. Of course, we can hear them playing cool music. The MLRS is slamming down, but we don't see any Ukrainian vehicles getting hit here. In fact, we don't see any Ukrainians there. We can now see them firing incendiaries and pridefully showing it. This is on Russian state TV. They're actually trying to burn Ukrainians to death, and they're going to show the Russians on TV, yes, we do that, and we're happy about it. That's the end of the video, and we didn't even see any Ukrainian losses that could be confirmed on film. We just saw an MLRS barraging an empty field for all we know. And so with that, we're now going to move out of this video, which is a sad display, and we're now going to be moving further south to the area around Marinka, where we saw a Ukrainian heavy machine gun firing. I don't know if this has music included. Usually it does. I pray to God it doesn't, because the sound of this gun is monstrous. So, here's the video. It's got music. But you can see a Ukrainian soldier firing this ungodly sized and ungodly proportioned machine gun. I believe, if I remember correctly, these are actually machine guns taken off of Russian tanks that have been modified into heavy machine guns for field use. And, oh my gosh, these things are crazy looking. It looks like something straight out of a Mad Max movie, perhaps. Haven't watched Mad Max, so I don't really know. I hate to say that. I know people are going to be like, what, you haven't watched Mad Max? Yeah, I haven't watched it, but it's a really cool looking machine gun, and I bet you that it's so heavy that you can kind of see the guy managing to recoil fairly well when he's firing it. But with that, that's the end of the video, and a really cool one to see that these improvised machine guns are still being used on the front lines, and hopefully incredibly effectively. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk region, as beyond the artillery footage we got today, we haven't gotten a large suggestion of a resumption of activity anywhere else. And so, as far as we can tell, there may be the occasional artillery battle occurring in this area, but beyond that, the front has largely fallen somewhat silent like it's normally been. Moving on into the southern front, y'all may notice that it's been a ghost yard for the past 2 days, and hopefully it stays that way. The Russians have not conducted any offensives in this area for months, and the Ukrainians have also not conducted any counterattacks, as far as we know of, for months as well. And so, as far as we know here, there has been no activity to report, especially no video evidence to speak of. With that, we're now going to be moving past the Inner Hadar area, which we may have been able to locate that location in known video to here, the one where the suicide drone slammed into a tent. That may have been where this was, but once again, we don't have straight confirmation on that yet. We're now going to be moving down, into the Kherson area. Sorry, for some reason that just... Anyways, we're in the Kherson area, and starting off at Nova Kakhovka, we have seen brand new air defense systems by the Russians being destroyed. This is what used to be an air defense system. What it is now is charred remains of aluminum and some rubber. Apparently, this thing was called a Podlet K1. So let's pull that thing up. Podlet K1. And let's go to the images. And here is the Podlet. A very weird name. Let's see this one. Doesn't seem like there's a lot shown about this thing in images. Yeah, I just don't see a lot on it. So it seems by and large that it's so new that there's not... Well, wait a minute. This is from Wikipedia. Let's go here. Will this take us to a Wikipedia article? I don't think it will. I might not know. Wait a minute, hang on. So there's some pictures of it, but we don't have any links to it, I don't think. So sadly, it looks like it's so new we don't really have a lot of information about it, but that is a destroyed podlet in the middle of Novokakhovka. This is, as far as we know, one of the newest radar installations that the Russians have, just put into service in 2015, the same time the Armada, the T-14 Armada, was introduced to the world. And we've already seen one of them destroyed. Pretty good to see. Can we get an LSA in the chat for this thing? Because I think that this is a pretty good sight to see. We don't even know how much these things cost to even ascertain what kind of loss this really is to the Russians. So pretty happy to see. I hope we see more of these things getting blown apart. And with that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Novokakhovka area and more towards the front line, south of Davidov Brid, where we can see Ukrainian drone destroying even more Russians. This footage was uploaded by the Avdiivka, which is a civilian unit of drones. These have been in operation since the very start of the war, and just to give their backstory again, this is a group of civilians that are using their very own drones they have bought with their own money and attaching improvised bomblets to them to then go out, seek the Russians, and destroy them. It seems that as of late, they may have been turned into a TDF, and a lot of these people may have volunteered their services in the military, and it appears that their effectiveness has only increased as time has gone on. We can see them here finally finding a juicy snack in a BMP-2. The drone's now taking a good look and dropping a bomblet, and it appears that that one slammed right onto the back near the infantry compartment and fuel tank at the BMP-2, definitely causing it to brew on up and burn out. Now we can see it burning in normal vision without the infrared, and there's a nice little glow with an occasional little explosion here and there. If you're epileptic, make sure not to watch that kind of stuff. I know that's a little bit late, but I was just thinking about that. But anyways, it's still great to see that the Avdiivka is still moving around and in the Kherson area and destroying equipment there. It's of course crucially important to the war effort that these vehicles continue to be destroyed, whether they're armored personnel carriers, main battle tanks, or whatever they may be. Destroying anything that is associated with the Russian military brings the Ukrainians closer to victory. And with that, we're now going to be moving behind the lines to Snihurivka, where we've seen two HIMARS, not an M270, we know that these are two HIMARS just because of the spread on them, firing off their salvo of missiles somewhere in the area, hopefully picking out some choice Russian targets. And with that, here's the video. Isn't that nice? That's the end of the video, incredibly short one, but it is cool to see that the HIMARS are in operation and are hopefully knocking out loads of Russian ammo depots, communications posts, and wait, hang on, let me think. Supplies, communications, and command posts. I had to make sure to get that out correctly because my brain had a freeze right there. I couldn't say them all smoothly. But still, it's great to see that they are going to be knocking those out, hopefully with those missiles, and hopefully they pick the best targets they possibly could. With that in mind, we haven't gotten a lot of news from the Kherson area today as of frontline developments. We do have this bit of an enigma happening up here at the Vykospillyia area. We don't know if the Russians have been surrounded here, or if they got pushed back, or what. But it's somewhere in between these two truths. Either the Russians have been encircled, or they were pushed back out of the town. Regardless, the Ukrainians have made some kind of an advance in this area and are going to be taking Vykospillyia, or already have taken it at this point. We'll, of course, be trying to keep up on the news there and try and clarify it, since we did finally, for one of the first times, use a news article yesterday to get that information, and then they came out 16 hours later and said they were wrong. So we'll be looking into that and seeing what's happening up there, but we're getting loads of different stories right now, and so we'll just be waiting to see what actually happens there. With that, we're now going to be moving into the center of the country, and this was said to be somewhere in the Dubrovka area, but as far as I could find, the Dubrovka area is here, just west of Kropivnitsky. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that again. It's south of Uman, we'll say that. and we saw a supposed Russian kamikaze drone slamming into Ukrainians in this area, but this looks like somewhere on the battlefield, and in south of Uman is definitely not anywhere near a battlefield. We can see the little drone flying in there, and slamming into the ground and causing a little explosion. We now see what appears to be some Ukrainian soldiers coming forward and inspecting the area and seeing what had happened. We now see a second drone coming in and slammed into the other side of the alley, exploding onto something. We can't really tell if it's a vehicle or a shed or what. We can't see the smoke billowing up. It doesn't appear that anything's caught on fire yet. It appears to be smoke from the explosion itself. Now we see a third flying bomb come in, and it slams down onto what appears to be a house. I don't really think they have a plan or a pattern to this little drone attack here. Now we see a fourth one coming in, and then it slams into some other entirely different area. Also, sorry everyone if I do sound like I'm a little bit further away from the mic. My back is acting up terribly right now. Just in case y'all don't know, I have double major scoliosis, so every once in a while, God willing, I don't have a lot of this kind of pain, but every once in a while it does act up really bad. And right now I'm in excruciating pain, so that's why I'm leaning back a little bit, so sorry if the audio is a little messed up. But it's a very interesting little attack to see right there. It looks like it really had no pattern to the attack. It didn't look like they hit anything twice. It just looked like they flew in some paper planes and just hit whatever. So with that, that is the end of that video. We couldn't really tell a lot from it. We couldn't even tell if they destroyed anything. There was no ensuing fires. And so with that, we're going to be moving on out of this bit of news and what we could assume was the middle of the country based off of the title and where it said it was. And we're now going to move up to Kyiv, where we've heard a speech from President Zelensky today, of course talking about that about Ukrainian wheat finally making it into the world market, and many other things as well. And so without further ado, here is a speech from President Zelensky.
Українці, українки, всі наші захисники і захисниці. Сьогодні наша держава і увесь цивілізований світ досягли важливої домовленості. Є угода, яка дозволяє розблокувати українські порти і відновити український аграрний експорт. З першого дня повномасштабного вторгнення Росія робила усе, щоб не просто закрити для України доступ до моря, а знищити сам потенціал нашого експорту, портову інфраструктуру, нашу залізницю, склади та елеватори. Ми цього не дозволили. І зараз не тільки можемо відновити роботу наших портів на Чорному морі, але й зберігаємо для них потрібний захист. Це відпрацьовано з нашими військовими і з нашою розвідкою. Військові запевнили мене у 100% контролі підходів до наших портів. Довгий час всі деталі підписаної сьогодні в Стамбулі ініціативи обговорювалися з нашими ключовими міжнародними партнерами і Організацією Об'єднаних Націй. Багато лідерів були залучені до того, щоб вдалося відновити наш морський експорт. Я вдячний генеральному секретарю ООН Антоніо Гутеррішу та президенту Туреччини Ердогану за їхні зусилля. Текст підписаної сьогодні документа опублікований, і кожен може ознайомитися з його пунктами. Вони цілком відповідають інтересам України. Перше. Близько 20 мільйонів тонн минулорічного врожаю зернових підуть на експорт. Цьогорічний врожай, а він вже збирається, також можна буде реалізувати. Це доходи фермерів, усього аграрного сектору і державного бюджету. Це робочі місця, це кошти для посівної наступного року. У нас зараз вже в наявності зерна приблизно на 10 мільярдів доларів. Друге, нарешті є шанс знизити гостроту продовольчої кризи, яку спровокувала Росія. Є шанс не допустити глобальної катастрофи, голоду, який міг призвести до політичного хаосу в багатьох країнах світу, в тому числі в країнах, які нам допомагають. І третє – це чергова демонстрація того, що Україна здатна вистояти у цій війні. Важливо, що у територіальних водах України все буде контролюватися саме нашою державою. І для усіх зрозуміло, що з боку Росії можуть бути якісь там провокації, якісь намагання дискредитувати українські та міжнародні зусилля, але ми довіряємо ООН. Тепер це їх відповідальність і наших міжнародних партнерів гарантувати дотримання домовленості. І я хочу подякувати усім нашим воїнам, які очистили від ворога Зміїний, захищають Одесу і Миколаїв, поступово просуваються в Херсонській області, звільняючи нашу територію. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто щоденно доводить, Росія не виграє у цій війні. Готуємось до старту вже завтра другого Київського саміту перших леді і джентльменів. Ця ініціатива першої леді України була заснована минулого року і довела, що може направити м'яку силу дружин і чоловіків лідерів держав для вирішення різних проблем національного і глобального масштабу. Цьогоріч саміт буде присвячений темі післявоєнного відновлення України, і це не просто про відбудову, це про повернення людей, тобто про переселенців, які не мають стати біженцями, про всю необхідну допомогу і реабілітацію для тих, хто постраждав від війни, і про відродження соціального життя в громадах і містах, які були розбиті окупантами. Зокрема, в рамках саміту і на основі нашої державної благодійної платформи United24 вже почався збір коштів на спеціальні реанімаційні автомобілі для України. Не буду зараз розкривати усього, що підготовлено першою леді України та її командою, але відчуваю, що з дипломатичної точки зору це буде потужна подія. Говорив сьогодні з великим другом України Борисом Джонсоном. Передусім про безпеку і оборонну співпрацю. Очікуємо новий пакет військової підтримки. Відносини між Україною та Британією побудовані на спільних цінностях. І щоб не відбувалося в політиці, зв'язки між нашими країнами і суспільствами будуть лише посилюватись. Ввечері підписав черговий указ про нагородження наших воїнів. 180 учасників бойових дій, відзначених державними нагородами, з них 100 посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за незалежність України. Вічна слава усім, хто воює за нашу державу. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky here on day 149. And with that, we have rounded out the day 149 news. And tomorrow will be the first day of the 6th month of the war, day 150. Thank you all so much once again for watching the news segment. We'll be moving into the question segment here where we'll answer everyone's super chats and also as many live chats as we can. But of course, if you're here for the news alone, then the stream is over for you. If you would like, please make sure to subscribe and also hit the like button. If you would also like to comment in the video's comment section, that helps out a lot as well and helps us to reach more people and of course get this news to even more folks. So thank you all once again for coming, and we're now going to be moving into the question segment for everyone else and answering all of the super chats and all of the live chats that we can as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Also, folks, before we get into our final question segment of the night, before you leave, if you want to check out our merch, it's at enforcerstore.com. And moving on to our first super chat of the last segment, we have a $50 donation from Praise Adonai, who says, Enforcer and Matt, some in the media are beginning to say Russian losses aren't what Ukraine claims. In other words, Ukraine is padding the numbers. How do we refute the naysayers and hold our ground with the correct number of losses? Also, great work.
Well, thank you very much for the support, Praise Adonai, and thank you so much for enjoying the work again. But the honest truth is that there's really no way for us to know if those numbers are short, high, or just right. There's really no way to tell. So really, you can make any argument you would wish. My argument is that those are largely accurate, because based off of the information we have gotten, and whenever the Russians, in the very beginning of the war, actually came out with official numbers, they were usually exactly on par with the Ukrainians. There was a specific instance where the Ukrainians had said the Russians have taken 10,000 casualties, and the Russians came out and made an official statement saying we have taken 10,000 killed. And so the numbers lined up right there. And so based off of that one instance where the numbers just aligned just right, I would assume that the numbers have largely been accurate throughout the war, just based off of that one instance. But there's not really a lot to argue whether it's accurate or not based off of that, and there's really no way it'll ever be accurate or not. There's no way to tell if World War II numbers are accurate. When you pull up World War II casualty statistics, like I'll show you all this, World War II casualties by country. Usually, like right here, military deaths for the Soviet Union in World War II could have been anywhere in between 8.8 million to 10.7 million. And then when we have this giant nearly 2 million soldier disparity in between one casualty figure and the other, and you can really guess anything in between there and it could largely be correct. So, and as you can see right there, there's really no way for us to tell if the numbers are high, low, or what, because even 70, 80 years after World War II, we still can't get the numbers down on how many soldiers were killed then. So by and large, I would say the numbers are about as accurate as they can be, and there's really no other basis to go off of rather than whenever the Russians came up with numbers, they were largely similar. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, Praise Adonai. And I thank you once again so much for the support and enjoying this channel. You've been a long-time viewer and a long-time channel supporter, and have helped us to run this channel for an incredibly long time. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and I hope that does answer the question the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $20 super chat from 69 Manny NJ, who says, "Hello, I'm taking a little money from my cam girl fund to support the enforcers. For your Monday's videos, can you make one on the Kosovo War in 1999? Thanks for the stream, and mayo on hot dogs."
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean by cam girl fund. I don't know if you're saying you're a cam girl or
he's referring to the cam bot.
Okay. I don't. Anyways, we're gonna get past that part. I thank you very much for the support, and to answer the question part, I think we could maybe do something on Kosovo in the future. I have been trying to bat around a couple of ideas in my mind, and I've noticed that while the Government Cheese video was very well received amongst the viewers that watched it, not as many people watched it as I had anticipated. I actually planned that within a week's time of the video being uploaded, around 50,000 people would have watched the video. And if it wasn't able to reach that metric, it would be considered a non-success, or in my words, a failure. And it's only reached around 36,000 views. So based off of those figures, sorry, repositioning here real quick. I'm trying to keep my back on my chair as much as possible. Based off of those figures, it didn't really seem like that video was highly interesting to a major amount of people for people to watch it. And so we are trying to shift more from random things like that. My plan was to actually start talking about U.S. government agencies like the Forestry Service and stuff like that, and talk about weird little conundrums and stuff about them. But considering that it wasn't really watched a lot, the Government Cheese one, we are going to start moving more towards the war category and maybe just stay there forever and talk about war history and things like that. So one thing I was thinking about as the next video we may make is talking about the strategic importance of bridges and how bridges can lose or win entire wars. And also some instances like that, like the Kosovo little situation that happened in the 90s, might also be interesting to cover on stream as well. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does kind of answer the question. We may put that in the list of videos to make. I'll have y'all know, though, that there is no little video like that coming out this Monday. We're trying to still gather metrics on the last one, trying to figure out ways to improve the next one. And one thing that a lot of people did have complaints about, and I do believe that they were pretty valid complaints, is that there was a lot of stock footage in that video. And it's true. Y'all wouldn't believe this, but getting actual war footage is incredibly expensive, specifically the real stuff. I looked around into doing that, and to get a 20-second clip of film, a 20-second clip of war film, and have it licensed to be able to put on YouTube, that can cost somewhere around $400 for 20 seconds of film. And so you can kind of see the reason why a lot of YouTube channels don't actually show war footage, from that time, because you usually have to get it licensed because it's privately owned, and it costs so much money that it's almost pointless to show because it's just way too expensive to do, and it was way too expensive for us to do for sure. So we might try and include some more things, like we have this map software that we're looking at, where we can move around on a map and maybe animate it to show different things. We've been thinking about that, but by and large, the stock footage thing, we're going to try and deal with that as best as possible and get around to using as much of it. But at the same time, we can't use war footage too much because then, we could go bankrupt just trying to make a single video. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $45 donation from Trolling Them Softly, who says, I'll drink to that. More government cheese videos.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you did enjoy that government cheese video. I would like to do stuff like that in the future, because while wars are interesting and a lot of people say that is my niche area of expertise, Matthew can tell you, and this isn't trying to toot my own whistle or anything, but history in general is kind of like my whole entire area of expertise. I can tell you anything, really. I mean, not to brag, but I can even tell you where mozzarella came from and the whole entire story of mozzarella and Parmesan Reggiano. I can tell you anything. And so I would like to cover all kinds of topics, even outside of war. But, of course, I would like for people to watch them, and that's always an important thing to think about. So I'm glad you enjoyed the government cheese video. We will try and think about making more kind of in that category in the future. And with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from 2Huck, who says, thanks, guys.
And thank you so much for enjoying the stream, 2Huck. It, of course, helps us out a lot that people do enjoy these streams and support us to keep these things running. Because without y'all support, I've said this a load. I say this every week. I don't know any other way to say it, but without y'all support, we can't keep running. And so we're heavily appreciative of it, and we thank you so much for the support. And thank you so much for watching and enjoying this the way a lot of people do, including you as well. And so with that, thank you once again, 2Huck, for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $15 super chat from Matthew James, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Matthew, for your support of the channel, and we appreciate you very much. And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from VMan29397, who says, I read a report that put Kherson's garrison at 10 BTGs, or about 8,000 troops. Do you think that's the city's garrison or the region's garrison? And if so, how much will the capture of 2,000 troops change the offensive?
10 BTGs will most likely be the figure for the entire Kherson finger and the Kherson area. Because having 10 BTGs in the area, I believe, would outnumber the Ukrainians fairly well. It would be like a 2-to-1 ratio. So I believe that may be for the entire finger. But once again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not really sure what those numbers are attached to. So that would be my guesstimation. And so having 1,000 soldiers trapped inside of Vykospillyia, if it actually did happen, is big, because that's an entire BTG out of the 10 that are there. And so if it's destroyed or surrenders, regardless of whatever happens to it now, it's certainly gone. There's really no way for the Russians to get that back. So now they've been cut down from 10 BTGs to 9, losing 10% of their actual combat force in the area. And so that would be a massive amount of losses, 10% just instantaneously gone. And so with that, I believe that kind of loss would be significant. And I believe that number is representative of the finger, although I'm not entirely sure. So take that with a grain of salt. But of course, 1,000 soldiers lost, regardless of who you are, 1,000 soldiers lost in a single situation is a kind of a big deal. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And also, I just thought about this. I actually, when I sat there and gave other instances of videos and things I could talk about, I just realized that I subliminally mentioned everything is cheese. I didn't mean to do that. There was actually a load of other things I can talk about. Like I can talk about the first gas works in the United States, which was in Baltimore. We can talk about all kinds of cool things, all kind of crazy small things that most people might not know about, might find interesting. But it's not all cheese, and it's not all food either. There's just a lot of things out there that like, they're just cool, you know. You know what I'm saying? They're really cool to learn about, really interesting. They don't teach it in school, and it's not like when I say don't teach it in school, it's not like that goofy line that everyone always gives. Oh, you know, like you know, the Americans, they executed thousands of people. That's what they don't teach in school. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the really weird, little minute, just interesting facts that they don't tell you in school. Those are the kind of videos I would like to make. So sorry for bringing up nothing but cheese. I think y'all are all thinking I'm like a Wisconsin cheesehead or something now, but I'm not. I was just trying to bring up other examples. So with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer your question, and I hope y'all all got a little bit of a fleshing out of like what videos would be about. It wouldn't just be cheese, it would be a whole bunch of other stuff. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Mycroft, who says, I was the first to call for the A-10s. I was largely disputed. Now it would have been awesome when the Russians were all in a line. Now I am not sure. I'll defer to the enforcer. I used a different name that early in this.
Hey, that's okay, and I thank you very much for the support. And just because I have a different opinion than you doesn't mean it's you're wrong. You know, I mean, like you if you feel confident in your assumption that the A-10 is a good plane, stick to your guns. Don't let me saying what I say discourage you from going down your own path and thinking what you want. You know, of course, I'm not trying to like whip people into thinking the way I think. You know, people have got valid points. The A-10 may be a very good plane in this kind of war, and I may be entirely wrong. Who knows? But, you know, by and large, everyone, I think, kind of knows my spiel. I'm not really sure if the A-10 would be effective or not. But still, early on in the war, when the Russians hadn't really set up surface-to-air missile batteries, well, I guess you could say, I think it would have been effective because the war was just starting to form. And so nothing had been solidified yet. No defensives of any kind had been made. The Russians were entirely on the offensive. And so that 40-kilometer-long convoy north of Kyiv, if the Ukrainians had somehow had A-10s at that very moment, they would have definitely just worn the thing out. They would have wiped out probably that entire convoy. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you once again for the support. And you know, I'm just saying, I do have my own opinion on the A-10. I personally don't think it would do well, but a lot of people out there have a good point in saying it would. There's really nothing to back up any of these statements. It's more of an opinion based off of facts and how those facts are then interpolated, which then becomes an opinion. So don't ever get discouraged because I say something and think, well, maybe the A-10 isn't good. Stick to your guns. The A-10 may be good. I may be proven wrong. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. And I hope that does address that side of things again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $25 super chat from Trolling Them Softly, who says, piggybacking on West Fry, I want more Taiwan coverage.
I have heard that a good bit, and a lot of people have been wanting Taiwan coverage. There's nothing really to cover there right now. And I feel like I would become China Uncensored if I tried to do that. If y'all have never seen that YouTube channel, I think they're pretty big, aren't they, Matthew?
I believe so.
Yeah, but they cover China a lot. I think they have an obsession with China. But you know, there's not really a lot to cover there right now. We could, of course, cover the history. We could make a video about the history in between Taiwan and China and why there's a strife in between them right now. I think that would make a really good video. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we will look into it. We will put that in the queue of videos to make. Actually, let's run a poll, Matthew. I see we don't have a poll up, so I feel okay with taking up the space here. Let's ask this question. Do y'all want to see more offshoot videos outside of Ukraine? And then just give a yes or no answer. And once you get that poll up, we'll move on to the next question.
All right. And I'm going to finish that poll in just a moment and go ahead and read off the next super chat. Up next, we have a $10 super chat from TelMed, who says, how do you think Moldova, Transnistria, and Russia will play out? And also TelMed, on that last part of your super chat, I'm not going to read that out so we don't dox ourselves or anything, but yes, go, you know, that word, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't actually.
Well, TelMed knows what I'm talking about.
And with that, I think, can you reread the first part that wasn't uncensored again? Because it kind of threw me off that there was a censored bit.
And the first part said, how do you think that Moldova, Transnistria, and Russia will play out?
Moldova, Transnistria, and Russia. I don't think it's really going to play out anyway, because right now, Transnistria is keeping its semi-autonomy from Moldova, and so the Russians really have no real way to do anything there. And also, they would really have to secure their interests in Ukraine first before they moved on to Moldova. And then at that point, if you invaded Moldova, you would look like you're straight up warmongering, and that would probably lead a lot of European countries into panic and maybe getting in a direct war with Russia at that point. Who knows? So with that, I hope that does kind of answer the question in a way. It's kind of a brief answer, but it's really hard to talk about that because there's really nothing to work off of right now, rather than like an offhand statement here and there from the Russians. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next one. And I thank you once again for the support. Also, Matthew, what I sent you about, saying that was a good one in the chat, I was talking about when you put in that Mike Tyson thing about my back's broken. That's what I was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And so with that...
Yeah, what's wrong? What's wrong, Mike? My back is broken. What do you mean? Spinal.
And so with that...
Obviously, my Mike Tyson impression is not nearly as good as the Enforcers. That was pathetic, but y'all get the point.
And so with that, y'all finally heard Matthew do a Mike Tyson impersonation. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you for that, Matthew. And I hope I've answered your question as well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Richard McLeod, who says, a joke that I made up myself. A businessman was arrested in Moscow because he was selling bedpans made of tin to hospitals to poo in. He was calling them poo tins.
Oh my gosh.
That's a dad joke, Richard. What are you doing?
That's a really good dad joke, Richard. And I gotta say, I thank you so much for the support and throwing that in, because that honestly is about one of the best jokes we've had. There's been a decent amount of great ones that have come through, and that one is definitely taking the cake. And so with that, thank you so much for the support and that good joke. I like that one a lot. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And also, Matthew, is that poll up yet?
Let's see. I think it was in the progress of being made. So let me go ahead and put that up right now. Not on the Ukrainian topic.
And Ninja Painting said, and so with that, and so with that. Yes, I know. I say that a lot. You got to understand, though, that unlike CNN, unlike Fox or any mainstream news, I've got to come up with everything on the fly. This is not something that's kind of been pre-scripted or pre-planned. I come up with the news, I put it all on a map, and I sit here and I tell the story as we go. Usually I have a story kind of pre-constructed a little bit before, but if I spent that much time a day trying to do this, I wouldn't have time to do the stream. So with that, I hope that answers that, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Vance Hicks, who says, Enforcer, blockading Ukrainian wheat would be a great way to deny Ukraine the income from the sales. Do you think the Russians relented because they just don't need more world enemies?
Can you reread that one again?
Yes, Vance said, Enforcer, blockading Ukrainian wheat would be a great way to deny Ukraine the income from the sales. Do you think the Russians relented because they just don't need more world enemies?
I think that may be a pretty good case, because if they're threatening the food sources of, say, Saudi Arabia, which is also a member of OPEC, that could start to cause a lot of political implications there within the OPEC alliance. And so, in that regard, yes, I do think that they may have done that for that reason, and they also may have done it to try and get some kind of sympathy with the West, so that way some sanctions would be lifted from the Russians, which are already instated. And so with that, I hope that does kind of answer the question in a way. I can't really tell you the actual motivation that the Russians have to do something like this, but it is good to know that there's finally a sign of humanity in there somewhere, and they are going to allow the food to be shipped worldwide, so that way people don't start going into mass famines. With that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support, and I hope that kind of does answer, at least in my opinion, in a way.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Aurora in Alaska, who says, thank you, Enforcer and team.
Thank you so much for the support. And of course, I highly appreciate that everyone enjoys these streams and helps us to keep this thing on going and running. Without y'all's support, once again, this stream wouldn't be able to keep going. And so we are highly appreciative of every single one of y'all who helps this stream to keep on chugging and keep on covering this war news daily. Also, just to kind of like answer to everyone what the poll is about, because maybe there's a little bit of a misunderstanding here. The videos that we're talking about are not going to be supplanting any of the Ukraine war information. And also that includes everything. That would include Taiwan, more videos like the government cheese ones, and such things like that. I see that it's like a 55-45 split right now, and y'all also have to remember this, and I'll kind of like cue y'all in on this. This war is obviously not going to last forever, and so we have to be able to talk about things that are not going to be this war at some point in time. And so we're trying to make sure that there is something that we can all talk about and enjoy that's not on this war, so that way when this war thankfully and hopefully ends soon, we'll be able to all keep on going as the Leaf Spring Army community and keep interesting topics up on everyone's minds, maybe current event topics, maybe just historical content, to keep people interested. So that's kind of the reason why we're asking about this, is because eventually we will have to move in that direction regardless whether the Ukraine war is going on or not. And so I hope that kind of does answer that in a way. That's kind of the motive that we are moving this behind. That's why the first cheese video came out. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again for the support. And I hope that kind of addresses why we keep on bringing this up. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from LG, who puts in there, this space left intentionally blank. So I guess, LG, you just want to put in the $10 donation and support the channel. So we appreciate you very much, and thank you for watching for a very long time. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from JK, who says, I have veterans working for me, and they're great people. Thank you all for serving. And that is a really good point, JK. And thank you to all the veterans in the chat and on the stream. I think the poll results were 31% veterans, so thanks to all of you that have served.
And thank you so much to everyone else who has served, and also everyone who's watching the stream in total. It's honestly amazing to me that we're able to have so many people watching that enjoy the content, and I'm highly honored that all of y'all have found us as the best news source to go to and watch daily, rather than anyone else. I just don't know why, but of course we're incredibly honored, and I thank you all so much for watching, and I thank all of the veterans as well for serving, because of course serving in the military is not exactly a cakewalk. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and thank you once again to everyone for their support, and thank you so much to the veterans for serving as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Sick Lid, who says, take a break, brother. You deserve it.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and we will think about it real quick, though. We're going to remove a nasty little person. Sorry about that, but yes, we will keep on going. I was talking about a little 3-day vacation thing a bit ago. We're probably not going to do that anytime soon. Really honestly, we're probably never going to do it. But I was just wondering what people were thinking. I'm always trying to see what people are thinking because, of course, every once in a while, because college is going on in the background, and there's people. What are you talking about? Y'all got to remember, I also do college work in the background on this. This is not the only thing I do. There's a load of stuff that goes on rather than the stream. Like today, I had to sit here for 5 hours before I started working for 9, and I had to sit there and work on college work. So, there's always stuff going on. And the reason why I was asking is because, of course, my family wants to go and take trips because we're still in college. We're still here with our parents. And so they want to, be doing stuff with us before we move out eventually. And so they were wondering if we could eventually all go on a trip. They were wanting to go to New England. And I was like, well, maybe I'll run it by everyone and see if that would be a possibility in the future. But still, the war is going on. And I do have a fervent commitment to making sure that we cover this war every single day we can. And so we're most likely not going to do that. But that was kind of the reason why we were talking about that. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And we are going to keep this train rolling the best we can. So with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Ashley, who says, dead orc equal blood, guts, bones, but no brains.
Well, that's a little morbid, but by and large, based off of what we're seeing, I would have to agree. It must not include a lot of brains. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Wes Fry, who says, Eastern history, like your China and Taiwan rant from the stream, would be great for a video with maps. It's not covered enough in Western schools. And thank you, at trolling them softly.
And thank you so much for the support. And to address that, it's not really covered a lot in school, and no one really knows why China's communist. No one's really told that history. No one, in fact, has really told any history outside, well, at least in my school. Here's how our history lessons would always go. There was a world that existed before the United States, and then Columbus arrived in 1492, and then the world came to be. It was almost like our history in our school was almost like there was a world that existed before. They had pots, pans, and some iron, and then Columbus arrived and said, "Let there be light," and then that's when the story begins in our school, almost every time. And so we would learn all about American colonial history. Then we would learn about the Revolutionary War. They would skim over the War of 1812 as fast as they could. They would not talk about the Mexican-American War, and you would immediately be thrown into the American Civil War. After the Civil War, you would then skip forward in the future to World War I, which was a footnote. Then you would go to World War II, and then you would move into the Cold War. And usually the Cold War was heavily rushed through. They would sit there and tell you, an Iron Curtain has descended upon Europe, and then the Russians and the Americans hated each other for 70 years. Well, not really 70, it was like 50 years. And then they won't even tell you about the Chinese, the Indians, what happened to the Japanese after the war. They kind of go over Korea, but not really. And then they go over nothing else. I mean, like, they go, like, in school, at least in my school, they went over nothing. And I guess the biggest thing they would go over in the Cold War was the Vietnam War. And they would sit there, and of course, the only thing they'd tell you about the Vietnam War is the government lied to everyone. And of course you know that, but it's like, what about the details? And, of course, asking public education to get into details on anything is kind of a big stretch, especially where I came from. The education was poor, and it did sound like, and I'm not saying that this is the entire country, because I've actually heard some very good stories from people from, say, Tennessee. It sounds like Tennessee actually had some really good schools, and it may have also just been the one we were going to, because if you got any kind of education going there rather than reading basic English, we weren't even taught to write at our school in elementary school. We had to kind of learn that on our own. You were very lucky. So with that, we're going to move on to the next one. I hope that does address the comment, and thank you so much once again for the support. And can you reread that one real quick, Matthew, just to make sure I covered it correctly?
Yes, he said, Eastern history, like your China and Taiwan rant from the stream, would be a great video with maps. It's not covered enough in Western schools.
And also, to just recap on that and make sure to wrap that all up, yes, history like that is not really covered much, and I think it would be really interesting to talk about it. And so with that, I hope that does wrap up the question with a nice little bow right there instead of just leaving it hanging. And with that, thank you once again for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Raphael Harris, who says, Enforcer Mason, age 9, asks, on a scale from 1 to 10, is Ukraine being barely touched or completely destroyed? Go Leaf Spring Army and Slava Ukraine and Slava Zelensky. And that's a really good question, Mason, and I'm sure the Enforcer has a pretty good answer for that one.
I have a pretty good answer. It may not be accurate, but in my opinion, it's around a 9. The Russians are leveling the country as best as they can, with as much firepower as they can, and I feel like they're trying to literally fire every single thing they have at the Ukrainians to try and destroy anything they can get within their reach. So in that perspective, on a 1 to 10, I would say it's a 9. It's about as bad as it gets. Most cities end up looking like Stalingrad did in the 40s. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I know it's a little bit brief, but I hope that answers the scale part of it. And with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from General Ralph HD, who says, Yeehaw! I haven't been around for a while. Is there any update on the POWs from the Azovstal factory?
Sadly, there isn't. We know that some of them were released. I believe around 200 of them were, but there's still a decent amount of them that are within prisoner of war camps in the DPR, and maybe even the LPR, but most of them have wound up south of the Donetsk city. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. We've largely had a lack of information about them. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again for the support. And I'm sorry we don't have a lot of information to go off of, but once again, we're flying in the dark about as much as everyone else is right now on that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Edgy Number 1, who says Putin is in control, but not in control. It's like he's the CEO, but everyone is trying to second guess him. Do you agree?
I would have to largely disagree at this point. He's been in fairly good control of Russia so far. The oligarchs have abandoned him. But once again, everyone does have to remember that it was not the oligarchs that made Putin. It was Putin that kind of made the oligarchs who they are. And so in that instance, I haven't really seen a lot of dissension. I've seen Putin removing a lot of generals, arresting political dissenters, people who have spoken against him politically. I've seen a lot of that. And so by and large, it looks like he's entirely in control. And based off of what we're seeing, his control is pretty bad and his leadership is pretty terrible. The Russian economy is in shambles. The war is going terribly. And I would say he's doing a pretty bad job. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Richard Harrison, who says, I've never seen footage of the 152mm SPGH Dana sent by the Czech Republic on your channel. I love the look of it, and it's got some great features.
And we will try and include that. Of course, it's very hard to find specific videos like that. We try and show everything that we can possibly find. But if we do find some more on that specific SPG, we will make sure to show it on stream. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. And I do have to agree, it's a very good looking SPG on top of that. And with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we were on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from, and everybody get ready for this, Sweaty Chungus, who says, this is for Lieutenant Head, who wanted to hear you guys say Sweaty Chungus.
And I thank you so much for the support, Sweaty Chungus. And I hope that does make everyone happy. Of course, we're always happy to have Sweaty Chungus in the chat. And also, I thank you so much for the support. If y'all may remember, I don't know if y'all ever were big fans of Brexit politics. We're not, of course, I'm not weighing in on anything, but I just want to say something that was funny. There was this guy who was involved in a lot of the Brexit politics called Nigel Farage. And I know we're already about to start a firestorm. Please do not. But just by saying that name. But after the whole thing was over, it seems like he's fallen on a little bit of hard times because you can find him on some kind of a website where you can pay to have people say stuff. And he said something, and I wonder if I can pull it up. But he was like, I want to congratulate Chungus on his 30th birthday or something like that. We're actually going to pull that up on stream. I know it's a little bit of a goofy aside, but it's still just hilarious to see. Nigel Farage. Chungus. Chungus sends his regards. This is it. Let's see if I can find the one that's incredibly short and just covers the thing real quick. So, here we go. I think this is it. And we got an ad.
A lovely ad.
Yeah, an ad. Look, this is what you don't run into on our channel as an ad. We never run ads. So we're going to skip that. All right, so here we go.
Marson, what did you do with Big Chungus? We know you're the sus imposter, and I saw you vent in electrical. What did you do with that wish delivery the other week, James? Use code Among Us for a $20 discount on James Marson merch.
I don't know why. I mean, like, I don't know why, but it's hilarious, and so I hope that kind of answers the Chungus thing a little bit more, and gives everyone an extra little round of laughs. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I thank you once again for the support, Sweaty Chungus.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to a few viewers who left donations without comments. Up first, we have a $5 donation from Blackhawk NZ. We also have a $2 donation from Dupper Bob, as well as a $2 donation from She Old the Dark, a $1 donation from Zach Jeffers, our Discord mod, as well as Ryan Miller and Helm. So thank you very much to all of you for your support of the channel. We appreciate it very much. And with that being said, we are moving to our next super chat, which is from Kevin Scott 76, who puts in a $5 donation and says, Enforcer, who is Mr. B, and why did they name artillery after him?
Great question. Mr. B is not a person. It's just an abbreviation for the artillery piece. I don't know what Mr. specifically stands for. It's just MSTA. But we can see a Mr. B right here. This is what they look like. Normally, we can see that this one's covered in mud and looking all gross. But let me try and go down through here. Let me try and find some stuff. Come on. Come on now. Trying to find why it's called a Mr. B. Can't really find you a reason why it's called a Mr. But for some reason it just is. That's actually a pretty funny joke you made too about it being a Mr. B. And so with that, thank you very much for the support. Sadly, we can't answer that question. It looks like we weren't able to come up with a reason why it's got that abbreviation. But with that, I hope it does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that, we are going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, Enforcer, I just want to go over the poll before I shut it down. It looks like it's pretty much split. 51% said yes, they want to see more offshoot videos, and 49% said no.
And so with that, it looks like we have a simple majority of 51% to 49%. It's really such a split, it's kind of hard to tell. But of course, honestly, we're probably just going to make those offshoot videos anyways because, you know, they're interesting. Of course, it actually allows me to kind of do things that are not on the war, which helps me to not get burned out. So I hope that y'all just enjoy what we come out with. It's going to be most likely on Taiwan and China, or wars and the history of wars and certain historical events that occurred during wars, and maybe every once in a while just stray out of those categories themselves. And so with that, I hope that does kind of address that poll a little bit. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a quick shout out to I'm Nunya for putting in a $5 donation and sending us the Keep It Up sticker with the YouTube thing, Grimace, jumping around, lifting weights. So thank you very much for the support. And moving on to the next super chat, we have a $5 donation from Trolling Them Softly once again, who says, Russians are the noobs that just mash buttons and hope that something lands.
I would have to agree. They do largely seem like that, and so I would just have to largely agree. I think they're poorly trained and they really don't know what they're doing, and they just pray and hope that eventually they do something right. And so with that, we're on to the next question. Thank you very much for the support and the astute observation. I would say that that's highly accurate. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Laszlo Uriel, who says, do you suppose they're called HIMARS because the users of the system are saying hi to the god of war, Mars?
Actually, not to be a dork or sound technical or anything, it stands for High Mobility Artillery something. Let me pull it up. We can just get the actual definition for it. It would be cool if it did mean that, like HIMARS meant high to like the god of war, which is Mars, but it is actually the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. Much less fun than HIMARS. So with that, I hope that answers the question. But it's not as cool as that. It's actually just pretty mundane. Kind of like everything that the Army names. But with that, we're on to the next one. And I think you want... no, the A-10 Warthog isn't actually the Warthog. It's actually called the A-10 Thunderbolt 2, but everyone called it the Warthog because of its gun and it sounds like a warthog. But with that, we are on to the next one. And I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does answer the question.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Michael Cabrera, who says, did you know Mike Tyson had cartoon series that ran for 4 seasons? Slava Ukraine.
I never watched it, but I did know that it existed out there. Apparently, it also had that guy, what's his name? He's that guy that always talked... No, that sounds like Obama. He's that guy who always talked about Hitler. That was like part of his comedy routine. He was like, you know, when you look at history enough... Hitler was
Norm Macdonald.
Yeah, Norm Macdonald. He was on that show too, as like a pigeon or something. With Mike Tyson and likes this pigeons a lot. But anyways, I hope y'all. I hope that kind of answers the question. I didn't know about it. And it did run for 4 seasons. I don't think it's running anymore though. I think it was canceled. But still, pretty interesting show. Maybe I'll watch it someday. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Bill Russell, who says, I happen to like the government cheese video, but then again, I like my cheese, and my mom growing up made killer mac and cheese with some of those cheese bricks.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I did see that a lot of people enjoyed the government cheese video. There was a higher like to view ratio on that video than any other. It was 1 like per 10 views, and so that's a fairly high ratio on this channel. Usually it's 1 like for every 17 to 20 views. And so it did get a lot of interactivity, and it got a massive load of comments. It was like 510 comments on a video with 36,000 views, which is huge for any of our videos. So we will be doing more stuff like that, but it'll be more focused on war. And you know, and another thing I gotta say this, because I feel like this is a simple answer to it. If you don't like those videos and you're not interested in them, you don't have to watch them. You know, like there's the choice of just not watching a Monday upload, because they'll always be coming out on Mondays. We'll work on them during the week, but the end result will always come out on Monday. So, you know, you can just treat it like another day where, you know, it's just another Monday where we're not broadcasting anything. We won't do a premiere again. I didn't honestly like the premise of the premiere. It kind of felt like too much build up for me for a 5 to 7 minute long video. So with that, hope that kind of does answer the question. And thank you so much for enjoying the government cheese video, because I did put a decent amount of effort into it. Apparently some people have like a militant problem with stock footage. And while I wasn't really happy with it all being stock footage, got to remember that using any kind of real footage is hundreds of dollars just for 20 seconds, and didn't really want to exactly bankrupt myself where I couldn't even donate to Ukraine war fundraisers to add in an extra 20 seconds of clips, you know, just to do it. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. Thank you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Jazz, who says, Enforcer, 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 Enforcer. Hi.
Hi. Thank you once again for the support. I hope that addresses the comment, and hi, Mars. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Paul Plonsky, who says, how can last year, or wait a minute, hold on. How can this last year's Russia, let me see if I can try to interpret, just a moment. Paul, I think autocorrect might have gotten you. He said, how can last year's Russia almost be depleted?
I don't really know. I don't really know how to answer that question, sadly. So with that, I think I'm going to have to pass on answering that question, because unfortunately I don't really understand it to answer it. But I thank you very much for the support, and if you would like to clarify what that's supposed to mean, or just, you know, say it a different way so that way I can understand it, I would be highly appreciative, and thank you once again for the support, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer the question. And so with that, we are on to the next one. It looks like we may be having a little bit, well, kind of. It looks like we're having a little bit of a tank with the stream's connectivity, so we'll just keep an eye on that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Mr. Lunchtime, who says, how did Africa get their nuclear arms?
South Africa got their nuclear arms largely by their own. It's kind of, I think they got it by their own nuclear weapons program, because South Africa was largely just its own independent country for a good bit down there. And then in the 90s they gave them up. So I hope that kind of answers the question. I don't really know the specific history behind it, but I do know that at some point they did have their own nuclear weapons, and then they voluntarily gave them up. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And just as another idea of something else we could cover as an obscure military topic, not a lot of people talk about the Bush War in Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe, and that may be an interesting topic that a lot of y'all are interested in, is that there was a war in Zimbabwe in the same time as Vietnam, pretty much. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. I'm not really knowledgeable on the exact details. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Richard Harrison, who says, please just Google the Czech Dana to get more fans.
Well, let's pull up the Czech Dana, SPG. And there it is, in all of its glory. It's a Dana, SPG. I'm not sure if it's Dana or Dana, but we'll just call it a Dana, because I like that a little bit.
Look at that camo, though.
Yeah, it's a really nice camo. It's like a weird, like, neon green, dark green, and a black. I like it. It's pretty cool. Now we can see Danas on parade in 1985. Kind of give you an idea of how old they are. We can see one right here being used. Honestly, a fairly modern-looking system to have been around during Soviet times. When you see one right there, and the older Soviet-looking camo. Well, I guess you could call it Warsaw Pact camo. And then we can also see one here that's had a modernized cab. which looks really good. But with that, I hope that does address that comment, and I hope that you are happy to see some pictures of the Dana on stream. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and to revisit that super chat from Paul Plonsky, he did send in some clarification. He says, I meant to say, how can Russia keep going for years when they are already nearly depleted?
Well, they won't be able, well, they could be able, if things started to work out for them, like if for some reason the Chinese hopped in and started to provide them with materials, they could survive longer, and that's a way. And there's a whole bunch of other ways, but really just the big one would be if the Chinese stepped in and supported them a little bit. Or if the West lifted some sanctions because they felt like they couldn't really handle the strain it was putting on their economy, regardless of how light it was. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question away. Those would be maybe reasons why the Russians will be able to survive for longer, even if they are looking depleted right now. And with that, I hope that does answer the question. We are on to the next one.
And for our final super chat of the night, until we move on to our live chat questions, we have a $1 super chat from Casey, who says 8 Mista B video is located at, and gives some very, very detailed coordinates.
And I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you did add in those coordinates. And we will look into that and try and see about locating that little marker later on, probably after the stream. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and thank you to everyone so much for the massive amount of support we've gotten tonight. It helps us to run this stream, and we're, of course, greatly appreciative to every single one of y'all who helps us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we're now going to answer 5 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. I have to make sure it's 5, because my back has been killing me this entire time. Like it's terribly, actually. And so I don't want to sit here for a long time. So we're just going to answer 5, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
And moving on to our live chat questions. Yeehaw! Well, first up, we have one from Rick Mentor, who says, why do you say the war is going Ukraine's way? Are they even retaking cities?
Well, yes, as far as we know, they have either encircled or retaken Vykospillyia. They've also stopped the Russian advance, and in a defensive war, as long as you've stopped the enemy or are pushing them back, you're pretty much winning. Especially since the Russians in their initial war goal was to take the entirety of Ukraine, and now it's the entirety of the Donbass, and they've done neither. That would be winning. If for some reason the Ukrainians lost, say, let's see, let me think for a second, I just got distracted by something. But if they lost the Donbass, or if they somehow lost the entire country, that would, of course, be losing. But right now, that's the reason why I'm saying they're winning, is that they haven't lost either of those, and they've also stopped the Russians pretty much dead in their tracks. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a question from Pakatang. The stream wouldn't be complete without a question from Pakatang, and he says, Enforcer, has President Zelensky completed his investigations and the removal of Russian traitors from within the Ukrainian government?
I'm not entirely sure. That kind of stuff usually just pops up on my radar every once in a while. I think that's a constant ongoing process, and it may never really end until the end of the war. So I believe my answer based off of that statement would be I don't think it's complete. I think they're still making sure that there's no Russian sympathizers out there, and this largely isn't unheard of in wartime. Usually this is something that happens pretty commonly, and even in peacetime, like in the United States with the McCarthy hearings, it's something that just happens. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Sasha Grabowski, who says, any knowledge on the delivery of the Slovakian MiGs?
Not at the moment. We haven't really heard about them making it into Ukraine yet, and we haven't seen any video evidence of them in Ukraine. So, sadly, we haven't gotten any more information rather than they're going to be sent, along with some Bulgarian Su-25s. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. We are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and to our second to last question of the night, we have one from Rimor357, who says, Enforcer, are the Russians running out of so many trucks that there are no trucks to be had when their guns need to be moved?
Maybe, and that may be why we saw a lack of trucks. I'm not really sure. We know that they're running out of military trucks for sure. They only had 4,000 of them for logistical operations at the start of the war, and around 2,800 of them have been destroyed right now, which is around 70%. So yes, they may be in the process of running out of those kinds of trucks that can actually tow those artillery pieces. So the answer to that question may be yes, but then again, that's just an assumption. We don't have hardcore information, we just have what we've seen on video, along with the numbers that we have right now, and those may be a little bit off. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the final lucky last question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person to throw in that lucky last question?
And the lucky last viewer of the night is Packetting once again, who says, Enforcer, will an increase of Saudi Arabian oil exports and a decrease in oil prices harm the Russian economy enough to significantly shorten the war?
Yes, it could, because that means that oil on the world market will become cheaper per barrel, and the Russians will have to sell it at a lower price, which will, of course, hit their economy heavily, considering that the entire thing is kind of surviving on oil exports right now. And so, in that regard, to make the answer a little bit brief, yes, if the Saudis lower the price per barrel of oil, that will definitely affect the Russians severely, considering it's a major economic I guess you could say motivator right now. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we have reached the end of the stream for the night. I thank you all so much for watching, of course. I hope I've answered the questions pretty well, and I hope you all have enjoyed the information that we've given out on stream, the questions we've gone through, some of the jokes we've had, and everything in between. Tomorrow will be day 150, and it will be the beginning of the 6th month of this war. It's going to be something really to think about that. It's 6 months since this, well, really, I believe day 150 is going to be the end of the 5th, and day 151 will be the beginning of the 6th, when I think about it, because day 151 will be on the 24th of February, well, the 24th of July, which will, of course, be the same as the 24th of February. Anyways, I thank you all so much for watching. Regardless, the end of the 5th month is rolling around, either today or tomorrow, and we're then going to be moving into the 6th month of the war. So thank you all once again so much for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you all again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And before...
Enforcer?
Yes.
Real quick, I want to recognize a $20 super chat from Gary Robbins, a longtime channel supporter.
And thank you so much, Gary. I saw that. I was actually about to address that before Matthew got to it. And I thank you so much for the support, because you've been a longtime channel supporter as well. And without support from our viewers, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing going. And so thank you so much once again, Gary. You got it in just at the right time. And with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again, and thank you so much, Gary, for that little super chat right there, right at the end. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.